Good morning, everybody. Wow, that worked. Hey, thanks. We're gonna make a good team here today. Good morning. Welcome to the Global Dairy Summit at the World Dairy Expo. There we go. Yeah. I'm Randy Romansky, Secretary of the Wisconsin Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection. We really appreciate you all being here with us this morning. It's an honor to welcome you all to America's Dairyland. Hopefully you've had a chance to experience the expo so far this week, and there's still some time to do so. I also wanted to welcome and thank a few other folks who are here, and I want to start by thanking our partners from the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture. Please raise your hand really quickly. Also wanted to welcome and thank Commissioner of Agriculture from Tennessee, Charlie Hatcher. Thank members from the Wisconsin industry, dairy farmers who are here. And also welcome and thank members of international delegations that have been spending time here at Expo so far this week and today. So we're very excited about today's program. It brings together world-renowned dairy industry leaders, and we're fortunate to have them with us, and so they can share their valuable perspective and engaging conversation today. It's fitting that Wisconsin is the host of the World Dairy Expo and this Global Dairy Summit. The dairy industry is a significant contributor to Wisconsin's heritage, economy, and future. The Wisconsin dairy industry generates an economic impact of $45.6 billion in the state's economy each year. Many associate Wisconsin and our cheese production, and there's good reason for that. The state is the leading producer of cheese in the country. It's home to 1,200 licensed cheesemakers who produce more than 600 types, styles, and varieties of cheeses. Wisconsin cheeses are award-winning. Almost 50% of all specialty cheeses made in the United States are from Wisconsin. So with that strength in the industry that's currently there, it's important to continue to invest, to stay on the cutting edge. And I just wanted to run through a few of the investments that have been made recently in the industry so that it continues to remain strong in the future. First is Wisconsin's Dairy Innovation Hub, which was created in 2019. Investing $7.8 million each year in state dollars into the state dairy research and development. Innovations are vital in agriculture and in dairy farming to ensure long-term viability. And the hub provides research in 4 key priority areas, including stewarding land and water resources, enriching human health and nutrition, ensuring animal health and welfare, and growing farm businesses and communities. The research is completed at 3 of our University of Wisconsin campuses and shared across the industry with dairy farmers, processors, and businesses. Second, Wisconsin is also proud of the investments the state has made in its Center for Dairy Research, located just down the road on the University of Wisconsin-Madison campus. Center for Dairy Research, or CDR as I'm going to call it, has a dedicated staff of experts and state-of-the-art facilities to conduct cutting-edge research and provide practical education and outreach. If you've not had a chance to visit CDR this time, if you're here visiting, or future times, please do so. It's worth the visit and the conversations you can have as part of that. Third, Wisconsin is also home to one of 4 dairy business innovation initiatives that were established in the 2018 Farm Bill and located across the country. Known in the Midwest as the Dairy Business Innovation Alliance, the alliance utilizes federal funding to provide direct technical assistance and subawards to dairy businesses. In the dairy industry, we are all working to create high-quality, nutritious products for consumers around the world. The dairy business innovation initiatives are fundamental in creating the products our international consumers demand and make dairy products more available to the growing global population. Finally, in our state, Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers has been a leader in investing in the Wisconsin Initiative for Agriculture Exports to increase the exports of Wisconsin agricultural goods. It also helps us coordinate events like this today because we all want to work together to grow our global dairy supply. The good thing, and I like to say this because we can get to yes on important things, and agriculture and dairy are clearly important things for us to get to yes on. But we can, I'm proud that the governor and the legislature have agreed to make investments up to $5 million over 5 years to increase the exports of dairy, meat, crop, and other agricultural products. These funds are helping to enhance trade promotion activities, providing grants and expanding scholarships for agribusinesses. It also gives us an opportunity to connect with delegations from around the world at events like this. One of the goals of today's Global Dairy Summit is to bring together national and international dairy leaders. There's going to be numerous opportunities to ask questions throughout the event, and the Global Dairy Summit will end with time for some networking. So please hang around afterwards and get to know each other a little bit. I encourage you to ask questions of the presenters, and I'm not just saying that because I'm not going to be one of the presenters. We want you to ask questions. On each table, there's going to be instructions for how you can ask questions through the presentation via slido.com. Corey's going to probably talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. Please engage with us throughout the event. It'll make the event that much more meaningful. There are also instructions on your tables on how to register to today's event. I know you're already here, which is great, but if you could please get us your information, because as we follow up, as we provide additional information, we want to know how to reach you, so please do that. So enough of me. Now it's time to get on to the show, and I'm going to start by introducing our moderator for today's event, and that's going to be Corey Geiger, and I'm going to invite him to the stage. Corey is the lead economist with CoBank, one of the largest providers of credit to the dairy and the U.S. rural economy. Previous to this position, he served on Hoard's Dairyman editorial team for 28 years. During his editorial tenure, Corey led the launch of Hoard's Dairyman China. Corey served in key leadership roles across the industry, including being elected president of the National Dairy Shrine, the Wisconsin Holstein Association, and Holstein Association USA. He's also served on the board of directors for the Council on Dairy Cattle Breeding and the World Dairy Expo, where he chairs the Education Committee. Earlier this week, Corey was named the guest of honor for the National Dairy Shrine at its 75th anniversary banquet. Corey also operates his sixth-generation family farm and published 2 award-winning books centered on family, farm life, and the greater dairy industry. When does the guy have time? But we're really fortunate that he's joining us this morning, and he will help generate a great discussion and a lively conversation. So with that, I appreciate Corey's willingness to be our moderator today. Corey Geiger, everybody.
Well, like many of you in the room, if you enjoy what you're doing and you have passion about the dairy industry, you find time is the answer to where does the time come from. It's an honor to be here at the 57th World Dairy Expo to MC the Global Dairy Summit. We have 4 outstanding presenters that will be coming up here shortly that will take us on a tour of the global dairy product prospects, domestic dairy production, manufacturing trends, consumer dairy product purchasing patterns, and the future of dairy ingredients. You can already start by asking questions. Secretary Romansky talked about the placards that are at each of your tables. We're going to use slido.com to ask questions. That's Slido, SLIDO.com. Once at slido.com, you can use the event code GDSWDE. GDSWDE is a short abbreviation for Global Dairy Summit, World Dairy Expo, if you want to know how we came up with that. You can ask your questions at any time, and I'd encourage you to do them as soon as you hear something from the speakers that spark your interests. And if you like someone else's question, give it a thumbs up, and that will raise it up into the queue. So let's get started with our first speaker. and I can invite her to start making her way to the stage. As president and CEO of the U.S. Dairy Export Council, or as many we know as USDEC, Krista Harden leverages a strong background within agriculture, sustainability, and food policy in fulfilling USDEC's mission to promote dairy exports and enrich the well-being of people, communities, and the planet. Krista first joined USDEC in May of 2000 as Chief Operating Officer and then worked for President and CEO Tom Vilsack to fine-tune the organization. Krista is not new to dairy. In April of 2014, she began working for Dairy Management, Inc., the dairy checkoff funded by U.S. dairy farmers. At DMI, Krista led efforts to define the vision, strategy, and plan forward for U.S. dairy's environmental commitment. In other agricultural service, Krista has served 3 years as Vice President of External Affairs and Chief Sustainability Officer for Corteva AgriScience, the agricultural division of DuPont. She also spent nearly 7 years working with USDA Secretary Tom Vilsack and nearly 3 years as Deputy Secretary. Preceding her service at USDA, Krista was CEO of the National Association of Conservation Districts for 5 years. Krista spent 12 years on Capitol Hill as staff director for the House Subcommittee on Peanuts and Tobacco and as chief of staff and press secretary for former Congressman Charles Hatcher. Throughout her career in agriculture, and I've personally witnessed this, Krista has focused on expanding opportunities for women, young people, immigrants, socially disadvantaged producers, returning veterans, and retirees, among others. Let's give a warm Global Dairy Summit welcome to Krista Harden.
Thank you. Thank you, Corey. I'm going to lower these things so they don't get in my way. I hate when somebody reads my resume. It makes me feel so old, Corey. You should have cut out part of that. Or either said that I started everything in kindergarten. It is great to be here, and I kind of like this mood lighting. I don't know if y'all do this all the time, but it's kind of cool. It's good. I first want to thank Secretary Romansky for inviting me. He called me last spring and said, will you put this date on your calendar, knowing that it was going to fill up, so I really appreciate you making certain that I could be out here, and I've had a great, really almost 24 hours. I went to the CDR yesterday. We've already heard a plug for that. I hope if you haven't been, you will go. It's extremely impressive and always good to be in Wisconsin and certainly talking about dairy. I want to first thank the dairy farmers. They make my job. I mean, they make my job fun. They give us really the products that we try to sell around the world. And there's one in particular I want to recognize, Marilyn Hershey, who is chair of Dairy Management, Inc., our parent company. And I'll recognize Dwayne too, because he's here as well. But Marilyn, thank you so much for your leadership and your support and your help for exports. I always love this picture because it's, it just speaks to the personality of cows. And I know all of you know how fun it is to work with them, and that certainly is an example of that. For those who don't know who USDEC is, this is just a quick mission statement. We were founded by DMI about 29 years ago when we were exporting about 3 or 4% of U.S. dairy supply. Now that's closer to 17, 18%, pick a year, pick a month. But this talks about what we do at USDEC on behalf of the U.S. industry. And we're not just in the D.C. area where our headquarters is, we're around the world. We have boots, pumps on the ground representing the dairy industry. We're that catalyst, we're the facilitator, where we open the doors for the U.S. dairy industry to get into a number of markets around the world, and frankly, that is growing as we start to look closer and closer at the continent of Africa. But we're there representing this industry. Our member companies are from pretty much the supply chain. We have the cooperatives that many of you are members of or know about. We have allied industries, we have processors, exporters. We come all together to make sure when we talk about U.S. dairy with potential customers around the world, we're speaking for the supply chain. We're talking about the commitment to sustainability, the high quality products that so many of you produce, and our commitment to helping to nourish a hungry world. And please note that when I talk about when we are selling dairy, promoting dairy, marketing dairy around the world, we don't just say we're feeding people. We talk about nourishment. And I think that's a very, very important part and something that distinguishes us, because it's not just about calories in a diet, it's about healthy, nutritious calories in a diet, and no better place to start than with dairy. So this is who we are. I hope that you will look us up on our website, learn more about USDAG if you don't know already. Over time, and this is probably speaking a little bit to the choir, exports have played a bigger and bigger part of the calculation of the success of U.S. dairy growing markets. I think all of us are pretty much aware that the population in the U.S. is fairly stable. We only grow by just a little bit, and dairy is present in about 90% of households already. So where's the growth going to come from? The kind of growth that brings another family back to that farm. The kind of growth that makes a decision to stay on a farm sometimes. Where is that going to come from? And I think the industry realized quite a few years ago it's going to be outside of our borders, and started investing in USDAC and the tools that we have to use, leveraging farmer dollars and other dollars to make sure that we have that presence around the world. And you can see these numbers. There's some dips, there's some takes, but it's definitely more on an incline. And if you look at one of the boxes there, I think it talks about the new production of cheese, which I know that's popular here for certain. 11% of that from 11 to 19 went out of the country. After 19, 24%. Almost a fourth of new cheese production has found a home outside of the U.S. borders, and those numbers will continue. And demand is rising in many destinations. As economies improve, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit, but as people become more aware of dairy in the diet, looking at how to incorporate really important dairy ingredients and products into their cultural favorites. A lot of times we just assume we're exporting. First of all, you know we don't export fluid, much of any. It's too heavy, it's mostly water, right? Only a little bit to Mexico. So it's ingredients, it's products, it's high value products, proteins, cheese. But a lot of folks don't know around the world how to incorporate good dairy ingredients into their cultural favorite foods. They understand pizza, they understand cheese on a hamburger, but that is not enough. That's not everyday foods in a lot of the world. So we have to make sure we're talking to customers, we're helping chefs understand, consumers understand how to use dairy. And the more we do that, more demand there is. We talked about COVID, the recovery, the health recovery in many places in the world, certainly in ours as well, but there was also an economic recovery that needed to take place. Countries shut down around the world. There was very little commerce, very little exchange. Currencies were devaluated. It's very, very tough in many, many places. As that starts to change and inflation and consumer confidence start to improve, you start to see people going out and buying more, eating more specialty foods. It might include dairy. So we're very hopeful that these trends continue. Now, it is a crazy world, so who knows what's going to happen. There are certainly very volatile spots of the world that do impact what happens with trade and exports, and dairy included. But assuming that things don't literally explode, and that's probably a wrong word to use, implode, we hope this trend will continue. And that is very good for agriculture from the U.S. and certainly for dairy. Producer margins for the farmers in the room, I don't have to tell you that this year is better than last year. I know your feed costs are much better, and the row crop farmers are hurting a lot because of that. But there's a give and take in our world, there's no doubt about that. But as things do improve and your margins improve, hopefully there'll be more production. We talk about expansion, we talk about growth, because there's such a tight supply right now, as many of you know very well firsthand. Part of it is because of just those tight demands on the system, and part of that is heifers. Now, I'm told that Australia has heifers to sell, And you can't bring in live heifers to the U.S. right now from Australia. So there are people who actually joke and say maybe we'll go through Canada. I think that's a long, long trip for a heifer. But they're about $700 and ours about $3,800, so it may be worth it. But that is going to limit the growth and keep that tight supply in the U.S. because it takes a couple of years, as you well know, to get a cow milking. So we definitely have some really real restrictions on expansions. It will hurt our export numbers, there's absolutely no doubt, because we have tight supply unless something does happen domestically. This short-term problems, we're certainly in cycles in agriculture, we all live through them. But you know, there's the good, there's the bad, and of course a little bit of ugly. But this is definitely something that we have to think about. It's really for domestic and international. People ask, you know, what's in the crystal ball for this year? It's been a mixed year. We hope that it's going to, you know, we've had a couple of good months. Not sure how we'll end the month. Part of that is just tight supply. Tight supply around the world. The EU, which is one of our biggest competitors, very tight supply. New Zealand has milk. They're starting to compete with us in some of our more reliable markets. So we will see what happens, but globally, tight supplies pretty much, which will impact all of us. But I think this is a very, very interesting chart because you see where the U.S. is and how important it's going to be, how potential growth can be over time, and what is going to happen to us. So you look at growth in U.S. dairy since 19, we have really been driving the growth around the world. Again, EU, New Zealand, right in there. They're not giving up either. They're going to want to be in the global market, but they cannot expand like we can. They don't have the natural resources, the regulatory systems, the will, in my mind, to expand. So just a quick little summary, just to make sure if you're taking notes or you have questions for later. These are some of the key points I hope that you'll take away with you about what's happening in exports. So there are folks, I'm not from Wisconsin, you can probably tell from my accent. The Wisconsin folks are laughing, yes. I am from Georgia. I grew up on a peanut farm in the middle of southwest Georgia. Not a whole lot of dairy down there anymore. But when I go home and they say, what are you doing now? Where are you working? I say, I work for U.S. Dairy Export Council. Exports, and I get these groans, these frowns. Why would you work for exports? We don't need exports in dairy. We don't have enough of milk in the Southeast. There's a lot of folks who don't understand the value and the need for growing those markets outside of our borders. So I said, well, 17%, and I asked every dairy farmer, are you willing to cut your production by 17%, or do you want just your neighbor to? What would we do with that extra milk if we didn't have markets outside of the U.S.? Where would that go? That's one part of the equation. The other is for growth and expansion of bringing, you know, the next family back to your operation. How are you going to expand? How are you going to grow? How are you going to do more if you don't have the potential hope and the view that more people around the world can enjoy and appreciate a good, healthy, nutritious diet coming from U.S. dairy? So there's a lot of good reasons that continue to be very positive about what happens in dairy. I mentioned our competitors, and I'll just hit on that again. Yes, there's a lot of good dairy in the EU. Yes, there's strong dairy production in New Zealand, but they have so many more restrictions than we do in the U.S. We're the third largest exporter today. I'm very competitive. I say this everywhere, and folks who know me know that I am. I want to be number one. I think the U.S. can be. I think the U.S. should be. It will be. I'm very, very confident for a number of reasons. Natural resources, commitment to dairy, the tools that we have, a government that does support dairy. We have a lot of difficulties in many places in the world as well to farm. There's no doubt about that, and certainly in the U.S. as well. But overall, we have the climate, we have the situations to be able to expand and grow our production. We have the best genetics for certain. We have very efficient, very productive farmers that are going to continue to increase that per cow production. So I do think that we're going to be driving the dairy exports in the world in the very short time. And we continue to make very, very strategic partnerships and have collaborations. And I really want to end on that because I want to recognize our Indonesians. I believe there are 18 members of that delegation from Indonesia. We work very closely in the U.S. with the Indonesians, with their farmers, with their industry, with their government, helping them improve their production. A lot of small farms there, mid-sized farms, and a few large ones as well. They are very interested in our data, interested in our science, things that we are happy to share with them. And why do we share? Why do we help another country build up their dairy industry? We help grow demand hand in hand. We want more people, more consumers around the world to understand the value of importance of a healthy diet, and we can do that with local producers. In a country like Indonesia, and they'll tell you this themselves, I don't have to tell you that they're never going to be able to meet all of their demand in their country. They're going to look for trading partners as well, but they also want healthy, good products produced locally, so there's confidence in dairy. So local consumers understand importance of dairy from a local producer, and then we work together to grow that demand. It has been that formula has been very successful in Mexico and other trading partners for us, and we know it will be for the Indonesians. They have a very strong commitment to adding more dairy to their diet. We want to help them, we want to work with them, and with that, hopefully, expand and build our market. So we work very closely with them. We have reverse trade missions. We take farmers there. Folks come here, and I thank them for spending the time with us, learning, and really committing to putting more dairy in their diet. They have a large population. I believe it's the 4th largest population in the world. A lot of people who can really get value from having dairy in their diet. So that's just one example, but because the Indonesians are here, I wanted to call them out and also say thank you for your partnership, for the collaboration, for the work that we're doing together to increase dairy in the diet of your population. A premature applause, so thank you very much. I look forward to Q&A in a few minutes, and thanks for being here.
Thank you very much, Krista. And we got some questions coming in on Slido. Again, if you just joined us in the audience, you're to ask questions. There's placards there, but go to slido.com. It's slido.com. And the event code is GDSWDE. And go ahead and ask your question. Our next analyst and speaker is Mike McCulley, who owns McCulley Consulting, a firm that provides strategic consulting services to dairy and food companies. Client projects include business analysis, purchasing and supply chain strategies, market research, commodity risk management. In addition, McCulley Consulting has provided subject matter expertise for global consulting companies, private equity firms, and Wall Street investment banks. Prior to starting McCulley Consulting, Mike worked for over 15 years for Kraft Foods, where he held management roles in dairy, meat, and grain processing. Throughout his career, Mike has provided leadership on dairy industry issues. He served on the board of directors for the International Dairy Foods Association, Milk Industry Foundation, IDFA's Dairy Ingredients, and the Dairy Institute of California. He has also provided counsel as committee member to IDFA, the National Cheese Institute, and California Dairy Institute. Mike grew up on a grain and beef cattle farm in north central Illinois and remains active in the beef industry through his partnerships in purebred Angus and Hereford cattle. He has a master's degree in agricultural economics from the University of Illinois. Let's give a warm Global Dairy Summit welcome to Mike McCulley.
Thank you. Good morning. Appreciate the opportunity to come and visit with you today. It's a great chance to get back. I mentioned I worked in meat purchasing at Kraft. Actually, here it was Oscar Mayer a number of years ago. Obviously, being a number of years ago, it's been closed for a while. So got to live in Madison for a couple of years. And one of the other things I add, maybe I don't know if I should tell this joke or say this in front of this group, but I grew up about 3 hours straight south of here in north central Illinois. I was actually the second largest dairy farm in my county. I had 4 Holstein cows that I put beef embryos in. Usually the Jersey, must be too many Holstein people in here, they don't like that. Jersey people usually laugh at that. So, so what I think every talk you're going to hear this morning is going to be very optimistic. And I think that's one of the things you're going to hear about from us. You hear about when you talk to dairy farmers, you talk to a lot of people in industry right now. There's a lot of optimism about what the future looks like, and I think it's very positive. And what I want to do is give you an overview of what's going on here in the U.S. in terms of processing, the amount of investments, and really the outlook here, again, I think is very positive. And there's a couple key points I want to make as I go through this. And the first one is that there is a historic amount of new investments coming in to milk processing, to dairy plants in the U.S. I've been in the dairy industry since 1996. There's been nothing like this before. There's been new plants here and there at times. There is a wave of investment like we've never seen before. And this is it's a great thing. It does present some challenges, so it's not a straight line between here and there. There's going to be challenges for certain companies as they kind of work through this. But we're in an environment, and again, I've been around this for a long time. We're going to be in an environment, I think we're already there now, but for the next couple years, all these new plants are basically going to go into areas where we had cheap surplus milk, and it's basically gone now. These new plants are going to take that milk up. So the first point that I want to make here is we're now going to be in an environment for a while where plants are chasing milk. And that's very different than what we've seen in the past, where we've got milk chasing plants, cheap milk, growth in milk in some areas, trying to encourage plant investments. We've got that now. We've now flipped it around, and you heard Krista talk about, and everybody knows the limitations on milk growth here for a couple of years. We're going to be in a tighter milk supply environment, higher premiums, higher milk prices more than likely, where we've got plants chasing milk in different parts of the country. We're going to see milk shifting around from plants to plants. We're already seeing that today. I think you're going to see more of that going forward. And there's going to be, again, not everybody's going to win out on this. There's going to be plants that will not have milk, or not as much milk as what you think they might get. It's going to impact premiums and so forth. We've already seen some plants close this year. There'll be more of that happening as well. And again, this is something that's been happening for a long time. We see consolidation at the farm level. We're going to see that's going to continue. We're going to see consolidation at the processor level as well, and the plant level. Again, that's just kind of the normal flow of things here going forward. But you look at export potential. You look at domestic demand. It's we've got a lot of good growth prospects here going forward. So this is again a very, very positive story as we look out. This is not how everybody voted in the 2020 election in terms of the colors. This is milk production over the last 10 years. The green is where you see states that are growing, and red are states that are declining. And I use 2014 versus 2023, just your 10-year look. And there's a few things you kind of pull out of this. One is the total country grew 10% in milk production over that decade, so about 1% per year on average. But you look at this in a state-by-state basis, and it looks very different. And I really take a line and go from Washington, D.C. to Omaha, Nebraska, drop it down to the Gulf, and that whole southeast quadrant of milk outside of Georgia, which has got some big farm growth in a few areas there, a lot of red, big declines in milk production. What's happening with population? Increasing. So you've got a growing mismatch of milk supply and demand in that part of the country. But then you get into the middle part of the country, and the other thing to pull out of this is I put some red circles on there. So we talk about the U.S. growing 10% in the last decade. You really concentrate that down, in my view, probably less than 10 localized or regionalized areas where we really see growth, whether that's Magic Valley in Idaho, Panhandle of Texas, western Kansas. You've got good growth in the I-29 corridor up in South Dakota, western Minnesota, and then you've got good news. We've got eastern Wisconsin, Michigan, northwest Indiana, and western New York. That's where most of the growth has really been. For those of you from California, know that the growth has pretty much ended there, and actually in that 10-year period, saw California milk production drop a few percent. So again, number one state in the country on milk, they've stopped growing. In some cases here, actually pulling back just a bit. Going forward, what's milk production look like? It's I'm a beef cattle guy, so you show high beef prices, that's good news. I'm selling a bull in Oklahoma today, some heifers in Illinois tonight, Angus heifers and Hereford heifers in Texas on Sunday. I like high beef prices. And this, everybody's making money in the beef industry, so it's a good time to be in the beef. That's impacting milk in the dairy industry. This looks like we're going to be, over the next couple of years, below trend growth in milk. Now, there is the nuance to that, and Corey knows well about this. We're producing a lot more milk solids, fat, protein in the milk than what we have in the past. So when we look at milk production, well, geez, milk production's not really growing. We need to think more about that as actually milk solids production is growing, and that's more relevant as we're making things, whether it's cheese or butter or milk powder. So we're probably going to be below trend here for a while on milk production, at least on total volume. Solids, hopefully we get that back up in a couple years here, but we've got a fair number of limitations, at least for the next couple years. You've probably seen different variations of these maps. This is one where I highlight the major investments, whether they're new plants or they're expansions across the country. There's a few things to pull out of this. First, there's over $7 billion of new investment. For us in the dairy industry, we need to feel really good about that. This is a number of companies, private companies, sort of farm groups. I'll talk about kind of the ownership of some of these. A lot of, you got companies putting a lot of money into investments here that they are very bullish about the future of dairy. So I feel very good about that. I think that's one of the key points out of this. At one point I added up, it was over $7 billion. I probably need to add it up again because I've got Daisy on the map there in Iowa. That's $500–600 million plant. Idaho Milk just announced they're going to build a $200 million ice cream plant as well as a blending facility. So these numbers just keep going up. You can see the gold star, yellow star is cheese. And you can, there's half a dozen or more cheese plants, and there's several new ones. Fair number of these you probably know about. The Hillmar plant in Kansas opened up here in a few weeks. We've got the Leprino plant in Texas opening up in early next year. Valley Queen, Great Lakes Cheese. We've got Saputo moving production up from LA. You've got a few other Bongards expansion, Grande, and here in Wisconsin, Belgiosio. A lot of investment in cheese. There's been a lot of worries like, well, geez, where's that going to go? Boy, there's a lot of cheese. And we'll talk about that here in a couple of minutes. The other thing that I think is really interesting to pull out of this is look at some of those green stars, and most of the green stars are milk plants. And aside from the two Walmart plants in Georgia and Texas, which are the high temperature, short time, just your standard issue white gallon jug milk, look at the green stars kind of ringing that southeast. Well, that's the Aurora plant, it's mostly organic in Missouri. It's not on here, it was just last year. 9th Avenue built a new ESL plant in southern Indiana. Kroger had an investment in Ohio. Mountaintop Beverages in Virginia. Cayuga in New York. There's a small one there in Maryland or around Maryland. You got HP Hood investment in Virginia expansion. Those are all ESL milk facilities or aseptic beverage. That's again where we see the trends in terms of milk production in the Southeast. These plants are really set up to ship more and more milk into the Southeast, not necessarily in a tanker form anymore, but in packaged form. And I think we're going to continue to see investment. Same thing with Suntato out in Idaho. There's only a couple milk powder plants, the largest being the Dairygold plant in Washington State. You also look at this, there's not a lot of cooperative investment in this. There's a Dairygold to be one, CDI be one, Bongards. For the most part, these are private companies, and in some cases, groups of large farms like Idaho Milk, like Cayuga, that are doing their own thing. And that trend has been going on. I think that continues in the future as well. What's that mean? If you add up all those plants over time period here of a couple years or so, you're looking at 50 to 60 million pounds per day of new milk demand, of the capacity that's coming into these plants. We're going to be now looking out on that region. The biggest region is down in the Southwest, where you've got 3 big cheese plants. That's over 20 million pounds of milk. I kind of translate that into what's that mean. That's about, do your math. It's 250,000 cows of milk, new milk coming in there, and those cows are going into that area for the most part. There will be some milk shifting around as well. Out west, it's really the Dairygold plant's going to be the biggest one. CDI is going to pull some milk out of their existing plant, so 10-ish million of new capacity there. Upper Midwest, 12 to 15 million pounds. You've got maybe 8 to 10, the largest being the Fairlife and the Great Lakes plants out in New York. You add all that up, that's 50 to 60 million pounds of milk a day. And I'm not going to do public math and figure out how many tanker loads that is, but it's a lot. So at the point I made early on, plants are going to chase milk. We're seeing that this year. It's going to continue. And that's a very big shift than what we've seen in some of these areas in the country in the past, where we've got milk chasing plants, cheap milk trying to attract investments. That day's here. The investments are being made. The plants are going to open up. They're going to take that milk. And now we're in an environment where that milk growth is a bit constrained. So I talk about, well, there's going to be winners and losers here. One of the questions I get, and for those of you that have seen it, I think I've written in Hordes, I've written in Cheese Market News, where's the milk going to come from? How are these plants going to get their new milk, all this new milk? I make the point, I'm not spending several $100 million or more to build a new plant and then open up, I'm like, where can I get milk at? Before the shovel went in the ground on a lot of these new facilities or expansions, they already had milk locked up. They had commitments for milk. The milk is going to be there. To me, the more relevant question is who's not going to get the milk. And I think it's going to be largely milk powder plants in some regions will lose out. There's going to be some shifting around of cream and fat. So we're going to see probably potentially some reduction in butter production in a few of these areas. I go back and look at 2020 when the Glanbia plant in Michigan opened up. For years, you had a lot of milk leaving the state in condensed skim as well as cream. All of a sudden, Glanbia opens up and it's coming out of the state in a block of cheese. And that altered particularly the condensed skim milk markets. We're going to see milk, we've already seen milk premiums go up. I think that's going to continue as well. Again, I think milk powder plants in a couple regions, the Northeast, the Southwest, will be the ones that will be most impacted here. And this is the not so happy story for some facilities. If it's an older plant, higher cost plant, and all of a sudden they've got to pay more for milk or they're losing sales, they're going to have to do something different. They're either going to have to shift their product supply, we're already seeing some of that happen, or potentially close. I said four cheese plants have closed this year, and there'll be more to come. And I think they're going to see that more and more. We're definitely over capacity on fluid milk plants in the country. There'll be some powder plants that act as balancing plants that'll probably be short of milk, and eventually, they just won't work in terms of cost structures. Again, I'm a glass half full guy, so I look at this as a lot of opportunity. As Krista said, growing demand globally for dairy products. Europe likely not growing, potentially declining. Same with New Zealand. There's other countries, I think India, who knows about China, that could step in and do some export in the future, but the window's open for the US here. So I think that's definitely a good opportunity, particularly on cheese, but some of these other products as well. Not going to get into it too much. I know Krista knows this well, and we'll probably hear more about this in maybe later this morning too. It is a challenge that the U.S. has, as we really don't have great market access in some of these areas and regions of the world and countries. So that is a bit of a headwind for us. And really, you look at a lot of these investments on these plants. To me, they're really more focused on large-scale commodity products. And for like it or not, the U.S. does big well. We have big farms, we have big plants, and that kind of lends itself to more commodity production. So when we're talking about mozzarella cheese, cheddar cheese, some of those products, more commodity, but we do that well. The challenge is, how do we also do more value-added products, whether that's through whey proteins, you'll hear Dave talk about milk proteins and some other products that they're making. And again, that's going to be, I think, a growth opportunity for the U.S. And for Dave and I were talking earlier, we were both in Europe here in recent months. That's the focus that they're going to have to do more in Europe. If you've got less milk, same with Fonterra in New Zealand, if you have less milk, you got to squeeze more money out of it. What do? You're going to go up the value chain in terms of what you're producing. Where would the milk come from? Where's the product going to go? The simple answer, I'm an economist, and I say the market's going to work this out. If we've got not enough milk, the price is going to go up. If we've got too much product, the price is going to go down. The market will clear. It might not be pretty at times. I think, cheese, I've been concerned about, a lot of people have been concerned about how we're going to get flooded with cheese here next year, in the next couple of years. The way it's looking right now, timing might be pretty good. If Europe's down on milk, who knows, New Zealand's growing at least to start with. We've got good demand. If we have demand return to, domestic demand return to what it was prior to 2020, we may eat up this cheese pretty well. And it might not be nearly as impactful on a negative side as what we maybe thought. Again, I think there's a lot of challenges, but again, a lot of opportunities. I also view it as if you're a company, a co-op, a farm, a business, if you have the ability to and the interest in investing, there's a lot of opportunities here. And that's one of the things I'll leave you with, that the future looks very bright, whether that's domestic dairy demand, global dairy demand, and for the companies and people that can invest are going to take in those opportunities. However, the not so happy side is for companies that can't or won't invest, there are going to be some challenges. So again, overall, a good story, and I think one of growth, which is a good thing for the industry. So thank you very much again for the opportunity to be here. I'll turn it back over to Corey.
So I'm glad that Mike is here, and a lot of the red ribbons in the audience for the Americans that are here. When I'm on the World Dairy Expo Board of Directors and see red ribbons, I know that's our international audience, and we have a little bit of evolution taking place in the fluid market, Mike, and you touched on it. But ESL, extended shelf life milk, so some of our international exhibitors here probably are very familiar with that, and it's a little bit more of a new product here per se in the U.S. Could you just talk a little bit more about that evolution while we're up here?
Sure, great question. Yeah, here in the U.S., we've largely been white gallon jugs, half gallon jugs of milk that have 2 to 3 weeks of shelf life, and they're refrigerated. We have a cold chain, and that's what everybody's been used to drinking since they were a kid, and that's what they grew up with. You go to other countries that don't have cold chains, don't have local dairy industries, they're importing dairy. It's going to be either an extended shelf life or probably aseptic packaged, 12-month shelf life product. That has been something in the U.S. that consumers really didn't want or are very interested in. In all honesty, in the past, some of those products didn't taste all that great. The older technology in the pasteurization you would scorch a protein particle, and sometimes you'd have kind of an off note or flavors in that milk. So the things that we made were usually flavored to kind of mask that. Technology, equipment has improved over the years to where we now produce those products that are very good quality. So we usually see in the extended shelf life products are ones that maybe don't move quite as fast. So the extended shelf life milk products and dairy beverages that we have in the US would be things like Fairlife, Lactaid, organic, grass-fed, Regen Ag. A lot of these marketing terms are more specialty milks that are going in, when they're small, it's a smaller market, but also going into these longer shelf life packages. So they will, as they move through a distribution network or going into stores, they've got that extra shelf life to them.
Perfect. I really appreciate that, Mike. Let's give Mike a round of applause. We have a number of great questions coming into Slido, and thank you for asking those. For those in the audience, you can certainly go through them and give them thumbs up if you want them to be raised up in the question order when we come to our panel. So our next presenter is Heather Anfang. She serves as president of Dairy Foods and is executive vice president for Land O'Lakes, where she oversees strategic commercial activities in dairy retail, food service, and ingredients business. Partners to drive overall brand health and encourages continued engagement and development of team members within the dairy food business at Land O'Lakes. Heather has served Land O'Lakes for 25 years, including many years heading its dairy foods marketing division, as well as heading up enterprise-wide e-commerce sales. Heather earned her bachelor's degree in marketing from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and her master's in business administration from the University of Minnesota Carlson School of Management. Heather gained experience earlier in her career at Pillsbury and Circana, and for those in the international audience, Circana would track sales throughout grocery and retail. She is a leader in the industry, serving on the board of directors for Consumer Brands Association and the Innovation Center for U.S. Dairy, and the Global Dairy Platform, which will be meeting here in about less than a week in Paris, France. Let's welcome Heather to the Global Dairy Summit.
Thank you. Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be here today. And as Corey said, I work at Land O'Lakes, so I wanted to start out with just a quick review of what Land O'Lakes is. We're a farmer-owned cooperative, 100+ years old, started with the farmers in Minnesota and Wisconsin here getting together to really think about how they get leverage in the channel and how they come together to do things better for their businesses. We're a Fortune 245 company, $17 billion in revenue across the agribusiness spectrum. So we have an animal nutrition business and a crop inputs business, but the heart of our business, and I'm very biased because I work in this part, is the dairy side. And I'm here today to talk about what's going on with the consumers and how are consumers thinking about dairy. So dairy is pretty ubiquitous in American culture, right? Nearly all households buy dairy products. And you can see here, those are the household penetration. So what percentage of households are buying these dairy products? 97% buy cheese, 93% buy butter, 92% buy milk, 82% buy yogurt. Dairy in the retail grocery space is an $87 billion category. That is the #1 category in retail grocery. The #2 category is alcohol. So dairy beats alcohol. Yeah, there we go. And American consumers spend, on average, $670 per year across 11 categories. So think of that, we're spending $13 a week on dairy products in each American household. So it is a big part of the American dairy diet and part of our, kind of our whole food system. As we look at major themes influencing consumption behavior, I'm going to talk about health and eating habits, financial pressure, and sustainability. And we'll go into each of these. And so we'll start with health and eating habits. This is an important part of consumers' lives. And when they talk about what's important to them, health and wellness always comes up. And when you talk about health and wellness with consumers, they'll say the top item that they're concerned about or that they think about in terms of health and wellness is food and beverage, right? That's followed by physical activity and sleep health, but food and beverage is top. And so they're always thinking about how do they get better, more nutritious food into their diet, right? Protein is a big part of what they think about when they think about their diet. A big percentage of consumers will say protein is the most important ingredient in the diet, and a number of them say I'm looking for more ways to get protein into my diet. So dairy is a real nutritional powerhouse here as we think about how we can play in this space. Functional fluids, gut health, these are important areas that consumers talk about all the time. Snacking. Snacking is really important. We're snacking our way through life these days. And so if you talk to consumers, about 60% of them would say, I prefer a lot of small little meals throughout the day. So we don't sit down and have our 3 basic meals every day. We're snacking our way through the day, and dairy can play a great role in that. And then eating at home. 86% of eating occasions are sourced from the home over the past year. And that has always been the case. We always eat most of our food at home. Of course, during the pandemic, we ate all of our food at home, and that has stuck a little bit. So that has leveled back off again, where we eat out at restaurants now. But we are eating a little bit more at home than we did prior to the pandemic. And we're cooking differently, and we're cooking more. And think about how consumers look at recipes today. Very visual on TikTok, a lot more not as formal, right? Throw this in the dish, throw that in the dish. And so lots of opportunities to up your cooking skills and lots of ways by which people are looking at cooking and enjoying cooking as they're home more. Financial pressure. So Krista talked about this a little bit, but this is important as you think about the impact of inflation, and you hear a lot about this. I mean, certainly in an election here, we're hearing a lot about it. For those of you that live in Wisconsin, a swing state, you're hearing a lot about this, right? But inflation is a big deal. And as you think about you're going to the grocery store and you're buying your basket of products, it is more expensive today. Okay, and so the rising cost of living, and that has been very sticky. Wages have gone up. That's not going to go back down again. Some of the supply chain management has changed, right? We maybe went to secondary suppliers so that we had redundancy in the supply chain. There's costs associated with that, and that's not going to go away. So there has been rising cost of living. Things are more expensive in the grocery store. You can see on the slide there, the Consumer Price Index, dairy is the red line, and food is the green line, it looks there. So dairy went up higher than food, but it's come back lower than food. Okay, so dairy has come back down in pricing, and so that's a good example for consumers to think about the affordability of dairy, which is the next point there, right? As consumers are looking at their wallet every week, they're making trade-off decisions, and dairy can play a great role in that. In the Health Plus Economics portion there, 41% of adults say the cost of healthy foods can be a challenge in meeting their goals. Okay, so you think about the nutrition, the protein, the functional health that dairy offers to consumers at the value that it does. And the ubiquity that it is in our diet, there's just continued opportunity for dairy to grow. Sustainability is a big topic that we hear a lot about with consumers. 9 out of 10 consumers say sustainability is very or somewhat important to them. Now, what consumers say and what consumers do are very different things, right? I say I'm going to eat the salad, and I actually had the cheeseburger. And this is a bit of that space too. What does this really mean in the consumer life? What do they want to see here, and what are they willing to pay for? And that's a very evolving space for consumers. You can see 75% of millennials say they consider sustainability when they make a purchase. This does vary by age. We see this to be much more important with a younger cohort than it is with an older cohort. And so we have to think about that. Dairy has an amazing story to tell in terms of the efficiency, the productivity, and the sustainability that has been happening over generations in the dairy industry. And we have the stats to show it, and we know that there's significant work going on today locally at farms to improve productivity and create opportunities for the farmer to extend and secure the livelihood of their operation. And so this happens every day. We have an enormous opportunity as a dairy industry to tell this story in a way that connects with consumers, especially the young consumers who are looking for transparency into their food supply, right? Where is my food coming from? You know, Corey mentioned I've been at Land O'Lakes 25 years. 25 years ago, nobody was asking where my food is coming from. Today, they want to know that more. Dairy has a tremendous story to tell, and the consumer trusts the farmer. It's very interesting. Sometimes I did not grow up on a dairy farm. Sometimes I'll talk to farmers and they'll say, do they? Because it sometimes doesn't feel like they do. But I'm telling you, I have talked to consumers over my career, and they always want to support the farmer. They feel they trust the farmer. And so that's a good news story, and we have a great story in dairy that we have to tell. I'm going to talk specifically about cheese and butter. Selfishly, those are the categories I play in most specifically, so that's where I have the most information. And you heard some of this on cheese. Natural cheese category continues to grow, and there's lots of new innovation and forms and formats that have come out to help support that growth. In America here, we on average eat 42 pounds of cheese a year. That seems like a lot. I mean, that's like a little less than a pound each of us eating a week of cheese. And that grows every year. We love our cheese here in America. And we're not even at the per capita consumption rates of Europe. So we could even go higher than that. Continue to see the opportunity in cheese. Global cheese consumption projected to reach a record high. So we see those stats globally as well. And you saw all of the new cheese assets that are coming online to support that growth. And we've talked about protein, right? Cheese can really play a very nice role in that protein delivery to the diet. that consumers are looking for. As we move to butter, the demand for butter remains very strong. I have personally been a little surprised by how resilient the demand has been at some of the price points that butter has been at in the marketplace. Consumers continue to eat more butter every year, which is terrific. And they're learning more about butter as they're at home more, as they're cooking more. They're learning the role that butter can play in their recipes and in the meal. And who doesn't love butter, right? We all love butter in this room. Plant-based volumes declining. So we've had margarine and spreads. They've been out there for decades, right? And they have really declined over the last probably 10 to 15 years. As consumers are looking for clean label ingredient decks, they're looking for simplicity. They have this message about where does my food come from, and they see that very clean label on butter, and that is appealing to them. And then they're using butter and they're finding out how fabulous it is, right? Frequent ingredient and trending content. So you'll see butter show up all the time in things like butter boards or bulletproof coffee or butter candles. It continues to show up in interesting ways in culture content that shows the interest in butter. So it's an exciting category that continues to grow every year. As we think about innovation at Land O'Lakes, we're always looking at, well, what are the consumer needs? Where are there gaps that dairy can fill? Where are there barriers that people might say, I have a barrier here in why I don't use dairy? And so we're always looking at areas like that, but there's 4 places that we look at that are evergreen. We're always looking at these areas: convenience, authenticity and values, taste and experience, and health and wellness. So convenience. Consumers are always looking for new ways and convenient ways to use products, right? So whether it be different packaging, different formats, different ways that it allows me to snack, to be on the go with my schedule, always opportunities and convenience. Authenticity and values, this is what we talked about. We have a terrific story in dairy to talk about, and we need to continue to tell that story because the consumers are open to it and they want to hear it. Taste and experience, that is number 1. It always has to taste good, right? I mean, every day we have to eat. Every day we need food into our system and we want it to taste good. And so that's always for people number 1, right? And health and wellness. Again, so much information and discussion in the consumer base right now around health and wellness, and dairy has such a unique and interesting place to play. Here's some recent examples that I thought I'd show that I find kind of interesting. You know, Butterballs is something that we launched right after the pandemic, and it seems really simple, but this is sometimes how consumers think. If you have to pull a stick of butter out of your refrigerator and then you have to get a knife and you have to cut it to throw it in the pan, consumers don't want to do that. They don't want to touch the butter, they don't want to dirty the knife, they don't want to like open it and rewrap it, right? So it seems really simple. Butterballs, a simple way. I mean, it doesn't have to be, sometimes, you know, we think of innovation, it's almost like the aha. Like it's so simple. And so we launched this product. You just like throw the Butterballs into the pan. It's a half a tablespoon in each Butterball. They're fun, they're interesting. It's not going to change the world, but it brings butter into their lives differently, and that's important. Dairy Case cheese, we are in the Dairy Case cheese category like many of the players. And again, really trying to hone in on protein and snacking and finding those places that dairy can play and meet in consumers' lives. And then flavored and seasonal butter spreads. This is another one that's very interesting. We have this garlic and herb spread. We've had it forever. But we launched it and said it was a cooking aid tool, and it has like grown significantly as we've done that. So think, we're in the kitchen more, we're cooking more, we're looking for shortcuts. We have a flavored butter. They can throw that into the pan and it helps bring that flavor. And then maybe they understand, oh, butter. Butter actually acts differently in the recipe than if I'm using just olive oil. As an example, it has a different flavor, has a different texture, and I like it. So it introduces them into our categories. So finding simple ways to meet what the consumer's looking for and bring dairy further into their repertoire are really easy, simple opportunities for us. We also work really hard at Land O'Lakes to try to connect our products to our farmers. Again, we hear this again and again. We say to consumers, Land O'Lakes is a farmer-owned cooperative, and they go, oh, it is? Interesting. How does that make you feel? They go, well, that makes me feel better. I want to support those farmers. And so telling the story of dairy into the marketplace is so important because consumers want to hear it. And what we've said is if you eat our products, you are impacting rural communities and the livelihood and vitality of those communities. And consumers say, I want to do that. I want to do that. How can I help? So in summary, what I have is just really think about how we lean into dairy's moment, right? We're a nutritional powerhouse that is a good value that comes in a significant array of categories and forms and flavors and formats. And so how can we get those products more and more into consumers' baskets? Approach with empathy. Understand consumers are making trade-offs with their wallet. They are feeling financial pressures. And so how do we get the right products to them at the right value and then stay true to our values, right? Like I've said, the dairy industry has so much to be proud of, so much to communicate in terms of the progress that this industry makes, in terms of the terrific products that we bring to market that really do meet consumers' lives. And so stay true to that and continue to think about those opportunities. Thank you.
Really appreciate Heather being here. She has a great depth of knowledge in dairy products. As Secretary Romansky shared earlier, I serve on the World Dairy Expo Board of Directors and so glad to welcome so many people from around the globe here at World Dairy Expo. He talked about earlier about the delegation that NASDA has here from Indonesia, and if they could wave again to the audience. Thank you for being here. USDA's Foreign Agricultural Service has been doing a lot of work, and the team from Central Asia has some delegations here, and when I announce all three of them, they can stand up as I'm announcing them. We have a delegation here from Kazakhstan, if they would stand. We have a delegation from Uzbekistan here as well, and Kyrgyzstan. Thank you for putting the world in World Dairy Expo and the Global Dairy Summit. Our next panelist and speaker, David Linsmeyer, grew up on a dairy farm near Kimball, Minnesota, and has spent his entire life in the dairy industry. Prior to joining Milk Specialties Global, David co-founded and served as president of Protein. He also served as president of Glencoe Butter and Produce. He joined Milk Specialties Global as president of the Global Food Solutions in 2008 and is currently serving as the chief executive officer. Milk Specialties Global is an industry-leading manufacturer of innovative nutritional ingredients for the health and wellness sector, with certified manufacturing facilities in Wisconsin, Minnesota, Nebraska, Idaho, Illinois, and California. The core of Milk Specialties Global business is value-added dairy ingredients, and we have some questions coming in on value-added dairy ingredients, and I know David is going to really talk about that, including whey protein isolate, whey protein concentrate, milk protein, mycocellular casein, and lactose. David is a graduate of the University of Wisconsin River Falls, and let's welcome him to this year's Global Dairy Summit.
Thank you very much. All right. Thank you, everybody. Very excited to be here. It was fun. Last night, got a chance to catch up with a colleague, and we both grew up on traditional dairies and comparing what life was like back 20 years ago and how we operated and what life is like today. Things have changed a lot. We're going to talk a lot about it. Wonderful presenters ahead. Heather, I love the consumer side. We don't look at that enough. And Mike, we got to work on, we got a couple $100 million more to add to your maps that I can help you with. But as we take a look at some of the growth charts that Krista put up there, you'll see as our company growth charts probably mirror that significantly. But one funny story for those, I'll tell you about this tractor up there. It's my dad's tractor. He bought it, put about 8,000 hours on it, and 25 years later sold it for more money than he originally purchased for it. So just an example of some of the changes. But I'm going to talk a little bit about the milk specialty side, but I'm also going to talk about the bullishness that we have for lots of good reason as far as where demand is coming from and how it's going to continue. But from the start, you know, we talk about Krista, she took her chart back 10 years prior from 2000 to 2010. We were barely making noise in global marketplaces. We had to export product. We needed the Dairy Export Enhancement Program. A lot of people don't remember that. You needed a subsidy or support from the USDA to compete in global markets. So from a manufacturer to a producer standpoint, how exciting it is today. We're competing at a global level today on non-fat. We used to have a base support price for non-fat at 82 cents, and the global price was 65 cents. We didn't sell non-fat. We didn't sell an export cheese. Now we've got a level playing field across the globe, and that's really opened up a tremendous amount of opportunities for all of us, and especially at Milk Specialties. A little bit unique, the company has been around since 1950. Our legacy business is animal nutrition. We manufacture calf milk replacer, bypass fats, energy booster, rumen protected methionine. So we have an interesting view of the world on the input side. Really appreciate all of our partnerships with dairy producers in Wisconsin, but really across North America where we supply all those products. 2008, we started the human nutrition part of Milk Specialties. That's been where we've had a lot of growth in the company. We've been able to go from 3 facilities and 120 employees. Today we have 13 plants and about 1,400. We've gone from 80 million in top line to today we're about 2 billion in total turnover. A lot of growth on the human side, but a lot of growth together. There's a great symbiotic relationship. We'll talk a little bit more on that, but a strong focus on nutrition and a strong focus on added value ingredients. Our facility network, as a business, headquarters in Minneapolis, but our history has been here in Wisconsin, Boscobel, Wisconsin, New Holstein were a couple of the original manufacturing plants for our calf milk replacer business. But you can see, you know, we really invest where supply chain is. I love talking about Tulare County. I think there's 500,000 people and 900,000 dairy cows in Tulare County. Idaho, we have a manufacturing plant that we just started up there. Some of Mike's alignment in terms of where milk production, it's really where, you know, we've invested close to supply chain. So that gives a good lay of the land, but it allows us to participate in different regional supply markets. But everything that we do is here in North America. We get asked the question, would we ever expand internationally? And I think a big message to the producer side is that our answer is no. We love making product here in North America. We'll cover a little bit more on it later, but I just think the depth of the supply chain, sophistication of the producer, the efficiency and the yield that we're getting is exceptional. I think it's hard to fathom at times. If you had told, you know, some of us 10, 20 years ago that we'd be delivering 3.7 and 4.5 butterfat milk on a consistent basis, you would have said, you know, maybe one of your herds or 2 of your herds doing it. But to be able to do that at scale and at volume really is a testament to the productivity increases that we've seen here in North America. So super impressive. We love our North American supply chain. As a business, we have a global sales force, people on the ground, China, Singapore, Mexico, Middle East, and Europe. We're in 42 different countries. As a kid that grew up milking cows, and we really had limited options as far as where our export opportunities are. Very proud of that. I'm confident that when we look at our producer side of the business and talk to our customers on that side, that there's a lot of markets that we've opened up with the evolution of our human nutrition side that I don't think anybody else would be reaching. We've had a tremendous focus on global growth, and about 30% of our total protein pounds leave the continent in some way, shape, or form. And primarily, common markets that are there, as far as Korea and China, those have been obvious. But places like Vietnam, Indonesia, welcome them at our plant this week. Wonderful new opportunities for North American dairy. But it's really been critical to us and to all of our success, but we love our North American supply chain. And so we look at it to producers, and I'll join the bullish bandwagon here about talking about opportunities to continue to grow milk and milk supply. There's limits in Europe. I think the landscape, is changing there. And I think New Zealand is running up against some of those same issues. One of the things that we're excited about is for years, the U.S. has been an opportunity for all the other countries that are making casein and caseinate to import to the United States. Largest market for casein and caseinate is right here in North America. All the casein and caseinate hasn't been made in North America. 2 years ago, we started up our first production in North America in our Norfolk, Nebraska facility, making calcium and sodium caseinate. And then last year opened up our Jerome location where we make acid and rennet casein. For us, we got ulterior motives. We want to generate more whey supply. We're unique that we don't own cheese plants, but we're a large whey processor. For us, it was about building more internal supply. But there's a lot of those customers and people that live through the challenges of a global supply chain are very happy to have this product. And again, I take a look at keeping our dairy solids home and keeping external dairy solids out and protecting our home market. So we're very proud of that, and it's a great way that we partner with producers to be able to bring markets home. And we really feel like we're in the early stages of doing that as a business. Talk about dairy economy being strong, and I just touched on it a little bit earlier. Sustainability measurements, there's a lot to sort through, but one of the headlines that we know of clearly is productivity per cow is probably the #1 winner. And in North America, we lead the pack. So a lot of the global companies that say they really want to buy sustainably produced dairy products, they should be shifting their purchases to North America. Output per cow, 10 to 20% better than we see around the world. So we're really excited about that. The other part is just the commitment that we've seen. Our facility in Nebraska, I think by 2026, 50% of the milk that we bring in will be coming in from farms with a digester on it. So the story holds true for the consumer side. We're big believers in sustainability as a business. We made a lot of investments in it. We've been doing it for a long, long time. But as far as lining it up from our supply chain all the way through to the consumer is super important. As Heather pointed out, I really think North America is in a tremendous position to continue to grab more market share. So we're super bullish on that. The landscape in Europe, the landscape in New Zealand is more challenging. Their output isn't as good. There's a lot of fingers pointed in that direction. So what we're seeing, we've got high protein growth growing from a demand standpoint globally, and some of our major competitive geographies are going to have some real limitations. Ireland is down milk production this year over 6%. Those are big numbers in some big milk producing areas. That leaves a gap that's got to be filled. And I think North America is in the best spot of anybody, the best spot of anybody to fill that demand opportunity. So I think as we take a look at some of the feedback that we get on the consumer side, we're probably still in an early stage of people, selecting in or selecting out. But I think very shortly over the next 5 years, we're going to see more of that, where we will have better alignment. A lot of questions about whether there's value capture. The first things we ask, or first questions we get from producers is, are you going to pay me more for my milk if I'm doing all those things? That's still yet to be determined. I think we're probably going to end up in an environment where maybe it's the price to be doing business. I don't think that's the worst thing in the world, because I do believe if we're going to solve more of our sustainability problems, it's not going to be, nor should be, regulated by the government. I think executive leadership, corporate leadership should be leading the way and making that part of our plan because that's the right thing to do. That's what we all should be doing for the environment. Talk about the gap and say the opportunity for us to continue to grow. Mike put up there, pretty powerful stat, 50 to 60 million pounds of milk a day. We've got global customers that today are concerned about supply being met from other parts of the world. As I mentioned, we got a real leveling in areas like Oceania and certainly some of the challenges in Europe. It's probably a conservative number. I do think the need that we have isn't just about manufacturing here, but shortfall in global demand. Remember, our population is still growing. We've got a lot more people coming to this planet between now and 2050 and the backside of this century. So I think the opportunity that exists here for North America dairy producers is even greater than what Mike has pointed out. And we see that, especially being so involved on a global scale. So talking about opportunities beyond just some of the basics, and just to reinforce, we're super strong in high proteins. We do believe very seriously we're getting support from the whole Ozempic effect. Any practitioner that administers an Ozempic or GLP-1 is advising clients to be taking more protein. Protein demand is strong right now, and not just in categories, it's strong across multiple categories, which is great for dairy. We're very focused on high protein fortified products. But along the evolution line beyond protein, there's such a great story in areas such as bioactives as an area we're going to see a lot more growth and value creation come along. We ventured into the lactoferrin production a couple years ago. A lot of immune support that we see coming out of the backside of COVID certainly is looked at a lot differently than prior. I'd hate to see what life would be like if we had to administer another regulated vaccination. A lot of controversy over that. So the focus on trying to develop natural supplements to help you support your immune system is great. For us, our focus has been around the back of lactoferrin, alpha-lactalbumin, and MFGM as areas that are growing. The last one that we didn't get on our slides that we're super excited about is the snack category, and we expect to see a significant amount of growth in that category going forward. Fortified protein puffs, protein snacks, we're going to see a lot more of those. The snack category is over a $30 billion market here in North America alone. So as we look to the future, we covered a lot of ground quickly. We're really excited about general overall protein demand. We think that lines up where we're going to need a lot more skim milk, in our case specifically, which is probably one of the categories we don't talk a lot. Cheese doesn't seem to be a worry. Butter doesn't seem to be a worry. We need better homes for skim milk solids. We believe those opportunities exist in high protein areas. But for us, betting on the areas of both bioactives and delivering more nutrition in the form of snacks is going to be something that as we go and look back 5 years from now, we're going to see a lot more protein consumption coming from those areas. Okay. Very good. Thank you.
We're going to invite the whole panel up here to join us on the stage. And we'll open up Slido here as well as everybody's getting up here. So we're gonna go right to the top Slido question here, and I think I'm going to ask Mike to start with this one. The question from the audience here is, how can dairy cooperatives, many that operate less efficient processing plants, remain competitive with private processors in getting capital to build new plants or to modernize plants?
It's a great question. I think it is one of the challenges, and we see some good examples out there of dairy cooperatives that are making investments. So it's not a blanket statement that the cooperatives are not investing. We see investments with Dairygold, CDI, Upstate, Bongards. There's others. I mean, Select's doing a lot of work beyond milk. They're expanding as well. I think when you get into some of the cooperatives that have aging assets or older assets, less efficient assets, you know, there's going to be opportunities to move forward, whether they, you know, can move to, you know, other products, you know, whether they, you know, retrofit plants to do different things. The question is, where's that capital come from? And this, I'll be quite blunt about it. In some cases, their own, you know, farmer owners, and I'm not a long ways away from that, but they're getting close to retirement, and they're not investing on their farm, nor they don't want to invest in the co-op or the plant. So that's one of the challenges. There will be some cooperatives that will see that as an impediment, that they won't have the ability to invest. So it's going to be, you know, they're going to have to think outside the box and think differently on how do they grow, whether that's consolidating. I would expect to see potential some additional mergers. Not that this topic caused it, but you just saw 3 cooperatives in the Northeast recently came together to form a marketing arrangement or marketing agreement around milk powders. I think there's more and more interest around, you know, higher protein milks, as Dave talked about. So again, everybody's not going to be a winner in this, and be very clear about it. There will be some they're going to lose out, and we're already seeing that in some cases.
Thank you, Mike. The next question on Slido, and we're going to send that one to Krista Harden. Which export markets are you the most confident or the most excited about?
Well, that is 2 different things.
And they
But
are 2 different things, right?
I always have to start with Mexico, our very closest neighbor, trading partner, great relationship. I know that will continue. That relationship will definitely continue. But we also have to look at what's happening in the rest of the world. I'm excited about what's happening in Central America and the Caribbean because of CAFTA, which our tariffs go to 0 in January. So we're going to be taking advantage of those markets. They're very close in proximity. They enjoy U.S. products, and with the 0 tariff, I'm hopeful we can take advantage of that. But also Southeast Asia, we have an office in Singapore that really covers that region. I'm glad that we have folks here from Central Asia, hoping that will be another potential growth area. Obviously, Japan and Korea are 2 stalwarts for us. So I'm bullish on everywhere. I think we do have an opportunity in long-term sub-Saharan Africa, which we're just kind of tiptoeing in, but you have to, you know, you start sometime, and that's now.
Heather, there's kind of a fun question here, but we're going to pair it with one we had earlier here. Somebody in the audience said, tongue-in-cheek, is it true the difference between a good cook and a bad cook is a pound of butter? But
Maybe in the South. I think we might do say that.
so the consumer demographics are changing and they're evolving, and it's going to impact the future of dairy product offerings and sales moving forward. And butter's part of that category, but how do you look at it at Land O'Lakes?
Yeah. First of all, firmly believe the difference between a good cook and a bad cook is a pound of butter, right? I mean, that just makes sense.
Maybe 2.
Yeah, maybe 2. You know, it's interesting as you look at consumer demographics, it really is shifting. Here in the U.S., of course, the ethnicity of the demographics has changed, and we're really seeing a fragmentation in how the younger consumer is thinking about certain things versus the older consumer. We talked about that with sustainability. We see that with health and nutrition. We see that with, you know, how I want to spend my money with brands that share the values that I change. So I think it's always up to us to ensure we understand where the consumer is coming from. We understand where dairy fits into their life. We understand where we can innovate to meet their needs, but it's not a one-size-fits-all. And we have the opportunity through how we communicate with digital. We have the opportunity through personalization and formulation to really get more specific to meet that fragmented audience. But it is both a challenge and an opportunity because the needs of those audiences are different. And so kind of the days of like mass media, when we used to do like the marketing programs, I would say, boy, was that easy when I started, right? We did a TV campaign and some print media and maybe a PR program. Today, you have to be much more focused and targeted, and you can meet people in more targeted ways, but you have to have the right messages, you have to have the right products, you have to meet the right needs. And so that's just going to get more and more fragmented, personalized, and complex as we go forward.
Thank you, Heather. This next question, I'm going to kind of marry a couple of them in here. We're going to start with Dave, and then probably Crystal might want to jump in, or Mike. But so dairy products are more than milk, butter, and cheese. And you started talking about the dairy ingredients, and the audience asked, and you talked about some of those important ingredients. And we're at the Global Dairy Summit, and what we use an ingredient for in the United States is different than they would be in Japan or South Korea or Indonesia. How does your organization, how does Milk Specialties Global look at that? How do you incorporate, these aren't necessarily always used in full-scale dairy products, they're an ingredient in another food. And how do you see that market evolving and meeting consumer demand around the globe?
Well, it's interesting, we're talking a lot about protein, we're talking a lot about butterfat, but the number one component a cow produces is lactose. So there's a lot of byproduct processing that you have to put into it, and driving as much as you can into the added value side. China is a huge market for North American milk sugar. They've got 50% of the hogs over there. It goes into the, let's say, the piglet diet's critical to their immune system. So there's a lot of the byproducts that today we're all about, talk about the good stuff like butter and the high proteins, but you really have to invest and find the right opportunity to take those products. With the evolution of some of the permeate technology, the ability that permeate's able to fit into other areas before, as we've got better drying operations and let's say maybe a cleaner product, that's moved into some new categories, and that's very exciting on the ingredient side. So I think carbohydrates, whey, some of those basics fit into a lot more global demand than just the high protein. But you got to remind yourself that a cow makes more lactose a day than it does butter, fat, or protein.
I would love to add, and David is exactly right, and it is very exciting to see the ingredients when the protein is just so literally hot right now. Fortifying sports drinks, snack bars, those kinds of things around the world. A lot of folks are looking, the younger generation, we're talking about consumers. You look globally in a very young populations in many of these countries, they're thinking health and wellness, but you also have aging populations that are looking at immunity and gut health and bone structure. So how do we make sure that cultural favorite foods are fortified with dairy is one thing we spend a lot of time on in our test kitchens, working with manufacturers, working with chefs. How do we reduce salt by adding permeate? How do you fortify even baked goods and making sure there's protein in there? Again, cultural favorites, your grandma's favorite recipe, but make it healthier. That's what's so exciting, I think, about for dairy ingredients. And we really, as long as we stay focused and we listen to our consumer, we have a lot of opportunity around the world.
Let's stick with that theme, and Krista and Heather, if you want to talk about this, we're talking about dairy foods, we're talking about dairy ingredients, we're talking about nutrition, but there's a growing body of evidence how the role that dairy plays in health and nutrition, and talk through that and some of the discoveries that we're making in that space and what the future might look like there.
I'll start if I may. I want to give a shout out to DMI because the investment they make with places like Mayo Clinic, those partnerships, doing that, the research, looking at the data. How do we tell the story? How do we use all the elements and components of dairy for health and nutrition? The world definitely wants a healthier diet. We certainly see that in the U.S., which Heather, I'm sure, can talk to, but it's around the world as well. And as soon as we can connect the dots and show the rest of the world that dairy is part of a healthy diet, we assume that here because we do have those investments, we do have those relationships and decades of science and research. Not all of the world has that, so we have to make that available and continue to market the health and nutritious parts of dairy in the diet.
Yeah, what I'd add to that is, research that DMI is doing is around the importance of dairy in brain development. The first 1,000 days of life, from the start of pregnancy, those first 1,000 days, really critical. Dairy plays a really critical role in that development. And then when we think all the way to the other side of the age cohort and the aging population, and dairy can play a really important role in that group as well. So significant research that's happening at the industry level to prove out these claims and bring them out to the industry so that we're all talking in a cohesive, consistent manner, and through partnerships, like Krista said, with Mayo, with influencers, with folks in the medical field, with that pediatrician who you're going and having that conversation with. Do they know what dairy does for brain development, as an example? Are they talking about that with their patients? So significant work there to ensure that is happening.
David, one of the things obviously is making nutritious dairy products, but the other part is once a customer has those ingredients, making sure they're able to incorporate them correctly, or if they're in a region with high humidity or spore issues, to make sure they have a good customer experience. How do you work with that as an organization?
Heather made a comment earlier, I think is super important as they launch some of these products that, taste has got to win. So in the end of the day, what you got to deliver, maybe people are going to try it once or twice, but not the third or fourth time if you don't have something that has great taste. I think when you're talking about an ingredient perspective, that's probably been lessons learned over the years in terms of the quality content of bags that I'm sure when a lot of companies started exporting, and the quality and the liner and the thickness of the product that they're using for exporting is a lot different than it was 20 years ago. We're still young from being involved in this export market. Prior to 2010, there was a little bit of carbohydrates. It wasn't major values that we see today. So those investments don't just happen overnight to put in kind of the state-of-the-art technology that you have, but we've made tremendous progress in North America to be able to successfully deliver high-quality product to any marketplace and weather environment that product's going to be delivered in.
Can I just add something to that? And David is so true, is building the reputation within a global customer of consistency, high value, easy to use, quality products on every delivery, every shipment. That is something we didn't have for a very long time that we are starting to build. I'd say we're there, have built that reputation of being that kind of supplier that comes from years and years of consistency in delivery of product.
Mike and I have been talking a lot lately, and our milk in the United States and other countries around, it's a living product. It changes, it evolves. And so at least in the United States, we always learned when we were going through dairy foods classes that 10 pounds of milk makes 1 pound of cheese. And that's a wrong answer today. It's actually 9 pounds of milk from the farm makes a pound of cheese, or from every 100 pounds of milk, you now get 11.2 pounds of cheese. And the same with butter yields at 80% butter fat. We've moved from 4.4 to 5 pounds here in the last 13 years. This next question I think Mike and I will take, and I'll read it out loud, and maybe Mike will start and I'll finish, or vice versa. And how has the popularity of beef on dairy hindered milk production growth as farmers look to take advantage of high beef prices? So for our international audience, for years and years and years, the U.S. dairy industry bred all their dairy cows and heifers to dairy bulls, but then things changed, the beef market evolved, and technologies changed. So last year in the United States, 54% of the dairy bull semen sold was sorted to make a heifer calf. So all of a sudden you can get a lot more creative, and I'll kick that back over to Mike at this point.
Yeah, so go back, I think it was around 2017, it seemed like when the popularity of gender-selected semen really took off. I believe, if I'm going to get the numbers, I'm going to round numbers here, about 3 million units of beef semen were sold in 2017. Last couple years, it's been 9 million. I've got of Hereford and Angus bulls and bull studs. I didn't see it, not my bulls, but huge interest in beef on dairy. And it's you go back not that many years ago, okay, I've got my 1,000 cow dairy and I breed a Holstein bull or dairy bull, and I've got 50-50 bulls and heifers. Well, now with gender selected semen, if I only need 400, I'm going to breed my top 40% or 45% of cows dairy and go the rest beef. And again, for the folks from outside the U.S., just a few years ago, that day-old, week-old dairy calf was worth, Holstein would have been $25 or $50. Today it's 400. Well, yeah. Or if you bred it to an Angus bull, that beef dairy, that Angus Holstein cross calf, seen prices up north of $1,000 for a little calf, baby calf. Well, it doesn't take very long to figure out, back to my example, if I'm 65, 70 years old, about ready to retire, if I don't need replacement heifers, I'm breeding my whole herd to Angus bulls or beef bulls. Or we're going to just, you know, if you're raising what you need, you've got a lot more beef animals around. So to me, it's just really the math exercise between where do I make more money? Is the outlook better where I can, you know, from a milk standpoint, do I keep more heifers or expand? But hey, it costs a couple $1,000s to raise that heifer, or am I just better off taking that cash that check when they're a couple days old and move on?
And this is like an ocean liner that you have to move, because conception to birth is 9 months, raising that newborn to entering the milking herd's another 2 years. So we're talking about a 3-year proposition. As a reminder, you can ask questions using slido.com. That's SLIDO.com. There's placards on the table, and you enter the code GDSWDE, Global Dairy Summit World Dairy Expo. So that's the initials. It's on there, or you can use your phone and scan it as well. This question here, I'm going to marry about 3 of them in here, because we got an international audience, and a number of you have traveled internationally. Over my year previously, I was an editor of Hoard's Dairyman, and we had language editions in Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese, and Mexican Spanish, and Chinese, and Japanese. And many of those are good dairy product customers, but they have very good dairy industries in their countries. And as we, domestically, in Mexico, as they grow their dairy industry, we become partners in this journey. But the questions in here are related to some of our attendees. What advice do you have for Indonesia to build or expand its dairy industry? What about the African continent? What about Asia? And so, Krista, you've traveled the world, if you want to start with that.
Well, I think the partnerships and the collaboration among, and I spoke to this when I talked about Indonesia and our relationship with that industry, which is just beginning, just about 1.5 years old now, where we're working hand in hand, sharing best practices, working with the industry to grow the consumer confidence in dairy and local production is so important. We need local farmers. We need more farmers in the world, not fewer. We need more involved in our industry, and that will help increase demand. We all will own this together. Mexico is the best example where the U.S. has gone the extra mile to work with that industry. It is more stable now. They're producing more. They have better confidence from their consumers in the products that's produced, and most of their milk goes to fresh milk, which again, we do not export. We have seen that formula work. We're doing it in other places around the world. Again, it is building partnerships and collaboration among the dairy industry, and also the processing industry, who would like to increase processing, but it cannot be supplied completely by their local production, and they're looking for partners from around the world in the U.S. and offer a litany of wonderful companies. We send them our membership. We have 115, 17 different companies that are a member of USDEC. We share those lists when we have importers who are asking from any part of the world to say, you know, how can we augment what we do? How can we complement what's happening? And how can we get these specialty ingredients we may not have available in our country, but we want to put more dairy in the diet because our consumers are demanding it. So it is about building demand and working hand in hand with countries. And Indonesia is just a perfect first example right now. Is their government has said we want more dairy in school milk feeding programs, and we want to know how we ramp up to do that. So it's the way we can collaborate and help each other.
And I would say there's going to, you know, think about where a lot of the world's population is. It's around the equator, you know, plus or minus however many degrees, and that's not necessarily the best place to have cows. So I think there's going to be an inherent need for dairy ingredients, dairy products that'll be moving into those areas. They probably won't be able to develop a local milk supply enough to meet their needs. It can have one of, you know, have both, not just one or the other. And where we see, you go out another 10 or so degrees where you get into Europe or New Zealand or Australia, US, things like that, is where we tend to see more of the cow production. And for those of you, I've been in Jakarta before, I was in Singapore last year, and I was like, coming from northern Illinois, it's like, man, what's the weather here? And they said, we got 4 seasons: hot, hotter, wet, and wetter. And that's, granted, you're not going to have dairy farms in Singapore, but that's not really the best environment for dairy cows. So I think there is going to be a balance here going forward that's going to be developing a local industry on a farm level, as well as what Chris just said, just overall demand growth and consumer growth, which there's a huge opportunity for.
This question will start with Mike, and I think Heather and David could jump in on this one, because you're all studying this question. And Mike, you caused this one to come in here. So with all the new investment, you called it the most investment in your lifetime, $7 billion. How does that look? Will we have markets to sell all these new products, and importantly, commodity cheese? And who do you think will be some of the new consumers for that? Or, and how does that whole picture look like? And it's a projection, right? Mm-hmm. Of course.
And I would say that it's a great question. It is one of the questions that has been asked in the last year or more. And I think, as I was just talking to Will at Usedec about this here in the last day or so, they call it a cheese-ageddon, or cheese, that, oh my God, where's all this cheese going to go? We got this wall of cheese coming at us. I think it looks quite a bit different now than what it did even a year or so ago, that, yeah, we got more cheese coming in terms of production capacity. Also, one thing to kind of not lose track of, we, the collective we here in the U.S., we need a large-scale cheese plant built every year just to keep up with demand growth, both domestic and export. So what the problem, so to speak, is we've got about 3 or 4 of them at the same time, and we're going, we do have the potential of having more cheese here for the next year. So by 2027, we'll literally and figuratively eat our way through it. So we'll be fine. I think what we're seeing right now, and not to wish bad things on other areas of the world, but blue tongue disease in Europe has definitely hurt their milk production. Their cheese production's down. Their cheese prices are way up. That's effectively raised the floor of where U.S. prices have gone. And it also allows the U.S. to be more competitive. So I look out in the next year now, given 230s, 240s, 250s cheese in Europe versus maybe $1.90, $2 or so cheese in the U.S., hey, we're going to be pretty competitive, and we're going to start clearing some of that product, which, my assessment is if we can, 10% of this new production, if we can move into the export market, we've done a good job, I think, of helping address that new supply coming into the market as well.
The only thing I'll add is, consumers, we talked about, they eat more and more cheese every year. And so if you think about the innovation that has happened in the cheese category, it's a very routinized category. Everyone buys it. But now we have chunk cheese, we have shreds, we have different cuts of shreds, we have different sizes, we have snack options, we have snack packs. All of these innovations are providing an easier, more convenient way for consumers to bring cheese into their diet, and they continue to do. They're game for that. And so we need to take this investment, and we need to make sure we've got the right formats and flavors and forms that are going to help meet that increased consumption, because it does grow every year. So they're there for it. We have to deliver against it.
With that, we're going to bring our panel to a close. Let's give our panelists a round of applause for sharing their expertise. We'll just wait a second here during the transition. We have a very special speaker coming to the stage shortly. I'm going to clear the Slido.com questions, and you can begin to ask new questions. And with that, I am going to invite Secretary Randy Romanski back to the stage. Secretary Romanski, looking forward to hearing your next introduction.
All right, good to see everybody again. Thanks again to our esteemed panel, and thanks to you for asking so many good questions. Really appreciate that kind of interaction. At this time, it's my honor to welcome our next speaker, U.S. Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack. Secretary Vilsack is a champion for the nation's dairy industry here at home and around the world, advocating for dairy farmers, investing in dairy innovation, and marketing dairy products internationally. This is Secretary Vilsack's second time serving as Secretary of USDA, and he is working to build more resilient and competitive food system by creating more, better, and fairer markets. Continuing on with the dairy theme, in between his stints at the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Secretary Vilsack served as president and CEO of U.S. Dairy Export Council from 2017 until February 2021, providing strategic leadership in their work. He clearly is talking about a topic that he knows a lot about today. Secretary Vilsack has been recognized by many for his commitment to public service and American agriculture, and I am honored to have him join us today for the Global Dairy Summit. Please join me in welcoming Secretary Tom Vilsack.
Randy, thank you very, very much. It's great to be back here at the World Dairy Expo. And it's a pretty stark contrast to where I was yesterday. And I want to take just a minute to reflect on some of the challenges that producers have in Florida and Georgia and South Carolina and North Carolina and Tennessee. I was with the president yesterday, and we were down in Florida and Georgia. Devastation's real, the pain is real, the difficulties and the challenges are real, but there is a spirit that I think sort of says something about our country. We seem to be at our best when times are worse, and I was heartened by the hopefulness of the people I met with. They recognize that the road to recovery is going to be difficult, but we wanted to assure them that the Department of Agriculture was going to be there to help and to assist. And hearts and thoughts and prayers go out to them today as they begin that process of picking their life back up. It was 90 degrees in Florida, and I told them as a Midwestern guy I wasn't used to 90-degree weather in October. So I'm very happy to be back in Wisconsin, where the temperature seems about right for the fall. And I'm glad to be back at the Dairy Expo because it provides for me a framing device of sorts. I came here in 2019 at a time when I was working for the United States Dairy Export Council. And at that point in time, there were some serious challenges in the industry. So I thought I would do a bit of a comparison between how things were then and how things are now. And I start with the economy, the dairy economy and our U.S. economy. The last time I was here, the all milk price was a little bit above $19. The U.S. economy was actually, it was beginning to contract. COVID hit, obviously, and we actually had a negative gross domestic product number. Unemployment was rising and in fact got to about 8.4% in 2020. And obviously we went through a tough period. Today, the all milk price is at $23.05, and it's forecasted to go to $23.45 in 2025. Now that will make it the third highest all milk price ever. The highest price was in 2022, and the next highest price was in 2014. I happened to be secretary in 2014, 2022, and now, which is why I'm bringing it up. But it is a reflection of the overall economy and the improvement in the overall economy. Today we had job numbers that came out with an additional 245,000 new jobs. The unemployment rate went down to 4.1%, so that's about half what it was when I took this job in February of 2021. The gross domestic product for the country is now projected to be 2.3 to 2.7%. Headed in the right direction, record job growth, low unemployment rate, inflation coming down, interest rates also coming down, the stock market going up today and is at record highs, and small business startups at record highs. So that's one indication. Another indication that I know is important to the dairy industry is exports. And here we face a bit of global headwind because our economy here in the U.S. is actually much stronger than it is in terms of the global economy. I just got back from Italy where I met with ministers from the G7 nations, and I can tell you that there's a bit of jealousy in terms of the strength of the U.S. economy among my colleagues at the G7. They understand and appreciate that for a number of areas in the country and the world, things are not as bright as they are here. And that's one of the reasons why you would expect dairy exports potentially to be a little soft. Well, the reality is we're seeing cheese sales go up, and in nominal terms, the highest in 10 years. We're seeing high-protein whey exports also going up. In fact, we're expecting this year, 2024, to be the third highest export year for dairy products. And in fact, the period of 2021 to 2024 may be, in terms of a 4-year time frame, a record for exports. And I think the future of exports for dairy is bright. The U.S. Dairy Export Council is participating in our RAP program, which is the Regional Agricultural Promotion Program. Had an opportunity to provide resources to U.S. DEC to enable them to begin to expand and to look at opportunities in Asia and Southeast Asia, in Africa, and in Latin America and South America beyond our traditional trading partners, so that we continue to look for ways in which we can increase exports. And we're excited about that opportunity. I think that we're going to see less reliance on some of the traditional export markets and a broader array of opportunities for high value-added ag products going into places like Vietnam, the Philippines, opportunities in potentially in Kenya and other African nations, as well as some of the Latin American countries where we're seeing tariffs come down and opportunity expand. The milk feed price ratio, 1.67, that's the best ratio we've seen in the last over a decade. And so excited about the opportunity to talk about a little better economy than it was in 2019, 2020. Recognize that the industry is obviously waiting decisions that we make at USDA concerning the federal milk marketing order. I can't talk about it in great detail here today because we're still in the process of reviewing the comments to a set of proposals that were outlined in July. We received a number of comments, including quite a few from dairy producers. We're in the process of analyzing those and would expect an anticipated decision coming out of the department sometime in mid-November. Having said all of that, I also want to recognize that there are challenges. There are challenges for individual ag producers. There's also challenges for the industry. We've got a situation in Colombia, for example, where Colombia, for reasons that we don't think are justified, has assessed countervailing duties. We're pushing back hard on that, but we recognize that that creates a challenge in a market. At the same time, we're excited about the opportunity to continue a market opportunity in Chile, having finally been able to convince that country to acknowledge the importance of common names and the ability for us to continue to market our cheeses in the way that's appropriate, notwithstanding some of our friends in the EU that seek to protect certain names. Understand and appreciate the challenges that H5N1 is presenting. We're now at 286 herds across 14 states. I'm pleased that at least 73 producers are utilizing the Producer Help Assistance Program that we've encouraged to make it a little bit easier for them to embrace biosecurity measures. 63 operations are participating in our herd status program, which enables them to potentially move cattle across state lines more easily. And we are seeing an ever-increasing number of producers participating with our Emergency Livestock Assistance Program, where we're essentially paying producers who have been impacted by the virus to reimburse them for loss of milk production for a period of weeks. About $10.5 million has already been provided to those producers, and we're seeing that number increase. Keeping an eye, obviously, on the dietary guidelines, but I'm assured by our team that we will continue to see a robust commitment to dairy in those DGAs. I want to talk a little bit about some of the opportunities. But before I do that, let me talk about the more traditional approaches to the challenges that I mentioned. We are excited about the opportunity in the H5N1 area of potentially providing a vaccine. We are working in Ames, Iowa, on at least one of a number of vaccines that are in the process of being tested. We've got a field safety trial that's taking place in Ames right now, which will allow us, I think, to potentially, if it's successful, to move to the next level of field trials, and hopefully be able to establish a vaccine in the very, very near future. That's the hope. Of course, with vaccines, you never know. You never know whether it's going to work, and you never know how long it's going to take to get to a place of comfort. But we are prepared at USDA, once a vaccine is identified, to be in a position to be able to purchase a sufficient quantity that would encourage commercial production of that vaccine. Understand and appreciate that there are some producers that utilized in this year the Dairy Margin Coverage Program. Glad to see that that is still providing some support and help. We've made some improvements at the request of the dairy industry, and we'll continue to look for ways to make that program work for the nearly 11,000 producers over the course of the last several years that have utilized that this year, that have used that opportunity to make it a little bit easier in their operations. Between the Dairy Margin Coverage Program and the commitments that we've made through EQIP to producers, roughly 3,700 EQIP contracts through NRCS, we've invested about $2.5 billion in the industry over the course of the last year or two to basically help those smaller and mid-sized producers out. We've been heavily engaged in the procurement. We purchase a lot of product. We purchase a lot of food for food banks, for schools, and the WIC program. You might be interested to know that between 2021 and 2024, we have invested about $12.5 billion in these programs to purchase dairy products. The WIC program is interesting because we're seeing an increase in participation in that WIC program. We expect and anticipate to see at least roughly a 200,000 increase in the participation in that program. That basically translates to about $40 million of increased purchases of dairy products because of the percentage of WIC that goes into dairy, whether it's yogurt or milk. Also excited about the prospect of additional dairy sales at the grocery store through our Sunbuck program. Now, this is a program that was established by Congress and the administration. Basically, it's the first expansion, if you will, of nutrition assistance in quite a few decades. And the expansion basically provides for free and reduced lunch children and their families to receive support during the summer months so that youngsters are able to receive a level of nutritious food that will allow them to bridge the difference between when school ends and when school starts, when they have access to school meals. The Sunbuck program is currently operating in 38 states and tribes and territories, and overall contributed about $25 billion to the ag economy from a standpoint of purchasing at grocery stores. Every child gets a $40 voucher, if you will, every month for 3 months, so it's $120 per child. And when you spread that over nearly 20 million youngsters, it's obviously a pretty significant amount of money. And of that amount, assuming that these families are purchasing dairy at the same level that they would purchase with their paychecks or with the SNAP program, you're probably looking at an additional $2 billion of purchasing of dairy products as a result of that Sunbucks program. And we're continuing to look for ways in which we can encourage SNAP families to do more with their SNAP benefits. We just recently awarded several $1 million to Auburn University to help create an incentive program to encourage more dairy purchasing from SNAP participants. So all of that's happening, which I think is all positive news. I can't help but reflect on the fact that I'm back at the U.S. Dairy Export Council, where previous Secretary Perdue came. I think it was in 2019, 2020. And he was asked about the status of small and mid-sized dairy operations and whether or not there were strategies to help those small and mid-sized operations continue to be in business. And at the time, he was very, very truthful, and he basically challenged all of us when he said, you know, the way this is set up, unfortunately, you got to get bigger, or oftentimes you have to get out. We took this as a challenge, and I've talked to Secretary Perdue about this, as a challenge to see whether or not there was a way in which we create a different model. Not one that just simply focused on the sale of a commodity where you have to eke out profit, and doing so you have to spread that cost of eking out that profit over a larger and larger operation, which is a challenge for all of agriculture. Just to put a finer point on this, if you take a look at the time period from 2021 to now, and the income of agriculture writ large, the entire industry, farming industry, what you would find is that the last 4 years combined have been the best 4 years of ag income in at least 50 years, and I think I could make the argument ever. Certainly 2022 was a record year. And 21 was a pretty good year, 2022 was a record year, 2023, not a bad year. All of these, by the way, above the 20-year average of farm income. The challenge is not everybody feels that. And the reason they don't is because of the way in which that income is divided and distributed. If you look at the top 7 to 10% of farming operations, they represent somewhere between 150 and 180,000 farms. In that same period, that record period, those farms received somewhere between 85 and 89% of the income, which meant that 1.7 million farms had to share what was left, which explains why some people did pretty well and others continue to struggle, and it's why 88% of farm families in the country today require off-farm income to be able to keep the farm. So the question is, what do we do about that? And whether we're satisfied with that and whether we're okay with that. And I don't think we are. I think there's a genuine desire on the part of all of us to figure out ways in which we can enable small and mid-sized farming operations, the operations that sell less than $350,000 or $500,000 in sales. They're not only important to agriculture, they're really important to rural communities. Because if you lose farms, you lose the farm family. When you lose the farm family, you lose students in schools. Schools have to merge. You lose customers and small businesses that are owned by folks who live, work, and raise their families in those small towns. That impacts the economy of that small town. You lose patients at the hospital, so it's more difficult to keep it open. And the reality is you undercut an important capacity, an important part of America, small town, rural America. The place where a disproportionate number of people who serve in military come from, because there is an ethic of service and a genuine desire and belief in country and family and community. It's a value system that's worth fighting for. But to do that, you've got to create an opportunity for those small and mid-sized operations to be able to profit. And it can't just be support programs. It's got to be a new and creative model in which we essentially challenge ourselves to figure out ways in which those same farm families can generate more than one source of income from their farming operation. Or to put it another way, why is it the farm family has to work 2 or 3 jobs? Why can't the farm itself work smarter and better? And why can't we help it create 2 or 3 or 4 sources of income? So we've attempted to do that with several basic strategies. One involves asking the question of whether or not we can not only pay farmers for what they produce, but also how they produce it. And so we've invested and will continue to invest in resources under our Climate Smart Agriculture Commodity Partnership Initiative, which frankly started with the dairy industry, where the idea and the thought was that farmers should be paid and encouraged to participate in and to embrace climate smart agriculture, and that they should be rewarded for that with a market premium. So we have, here in the state of Wisconsin, projects with Edge Dairy and with Organic Valley and other dairy operations where they are helping to pay dairy farmers to embrace climate-smart agriculture and in turn create opportunities for that profit margin to be a little bit wider. We have, all told, 136 contracts that have been signed involving all 50 states, every major ag commodity and livestock that's produced in this country, and we're helping to incent close to 200 climate-smart practices, and we're beginning to see value-added opportunities being created. We're measuring, we're monitoring, we're verifying the conservation and the environmental results of those practices, which is going to set up the opportunity for those producers to also benefit from what are called ecosystem service markets. These are markets that will pay for environmental results. It could be a carbon market, it could be a water market, it could be a biodiversity market. That creates a new source of income. So you've got a value-added opportunity with Climate Smart, you've got a new income source opportunity with Climate Smart. We're also committed to the conversion of agricultural waste into a variety of products, including energy. And so we've invested significant resources under our REAP program in specific dairy operations where a digester or other strategies can be utilized to convert the manure into something more valuable. My favorite example here in Wisconsin is Dairy Dreams, which is a facility in operation just outside of Green Bay, a family farming operation. They essentially have a digester, and they're taking the methane from that digester and they're selling it to an operation that is producing renewable natural gas. So that's income source number one for that family, in addition to the milk that they produce and sell. What's left from the digester after they've set off the methane is used for bedding for the cows, which I suspect reduces their cost. After the bedding has been used up, they put it through another process, which creates two different types of fertilizer, one that's phosphorus-based and one that's nitrogen-based. They use that fertilizer on their own farm, and they can probably create enough to basically sell it to their friends and neighbors. So that's savings on the fertilizer side, and it's also a potential income source 2 and 3 coming out of the waste product that's being produced. And USDA was helping to finance this opportunity to create new income sources. And that's an example of how this might work. And we continue to invest in thousands of REAP projects across the country to enable farmers to produce their own renewable energy and use it on the farm and potentially even sell it to the local REC, which could become yet another income source for that farming operation, an energy source, if you will. So instead of just one income source, farm families now have 2 or 3 or 4 income sources. It's a new model. And in addition to that, we're also encouraging the development of local and regional food systems. Now, the reason we're doing that is simply it's a better deal for farmers. When you sell commercial and you sell it at a milk that ultimately goes to the grocery store or any other product that's being raised on the farm, essentially farmers get anywhere from 15 to 20 cents of that food dollar. But when you sell directly to your customer, directly to a school or directly to a farmer's market or directly to an institutional purchaser of food at a local market, that farmer can potentially generate 50 to 75% of that food dollar for their operation. So we're investing and expanding opportunities for local and regional food systems. We do this through the Value Added Producer Grant Program, which, by the way, that farm family in Wisconsin is using to produce cheese, which they sell locally, another income source. We are using it to encourage what are called local food purchasing agreements, where we essentially provide money through the state, as the state basically supports food banks and schools and food that's purchased for food banks and schools. We're directing a portion of that money be spent with local and regional food producers so that small and mid-sized farming operations have a new market opportunity where they get a bigger bang of the buck, if you will. In fact, we just announced a rather significant investment in that program, about $1.7 billion spread across 50 states to support and to provide additional resources for the local and regional food system. So all of that is designed to create new opportunities, and for dairy, hundreds of millions of dollars is being invested through that process to help create better opportunities. We also recognize the power of organic, and so we've invested in expanded market development for organic dairy. We made basically 106 awards under our market development program for organic, investing $85 million in trying to figure out ways in which we could expand opportunities there. We just recently announced marketing assistance for organic dairy operations, assisting them in sort of deferring some of the expense associated with marketing of their product. So all of that's designed to really provide an alternative model to the notion of the only recourse is to get big or get out. And we've also invested in 4 locations across the country, which are dairy innovation centers. There's one here in Wisconsin, the University of Wisconsin's engaged in. There's one in Tennessee, the University of Tennessee is involved. Vermont has one through their Vermont Agency for Agriculture, Food, and Markets, and California has one through Cal State at Fresno. These 4 innovation centers take resources from USDA, and they leverage those resources to help focus on the development of new products, the production of those products, the marketing of new products, and the distribution of those new products. To date, we've invested $64 million in these innovation centers, helping to fund over 600 new opportunities for dairy producers in 40 states across the country. Really focused on value-added opportunities and modernizing dairy facilities for small and mid-sized operations. And today we're adding another $11 million to those 4 dairy innovation centers because we know that they can leverage significant investment and that they can create new opportunities for farm families across the country. So whether it's climate smart agriculture, whether it's investments in renewable energy, whether it's opportunities to convert agricultural waste into a new commodity opportunity, whether it's local and regional food systems, whether it's investment in innovation, we are betting on and we believe in this industry and the importance of this industry. And we believe that if we can continue to do this, that over time we can begin the process of reversing the decline of dairy farms and small and mid-sized operations in this country. I think dairy better understands this better than most farmers in terms of the magnitude of the loss that we've suffered. But to give you sort of a larger context for all of this, in 1981, Secretary Berglund, who was Secretary of Agriculture in the Carter administration, was leaving office. And as he was leaving office, he basically expressed concern about the fact that we in the country had changed our way of supporting agriculture from a supply management system to a more market-oriented system. And he was concerned about the fact that this could result and lead to larger and larger farming operations and fewer farms. Since he gave that speech and issued that report, we've lost 544,970 farms in this country. Now, I'm married to a middle school teacher, and she told me that that's a big number, and I needed to put it in context. So I did a little research, and it turns out that's the same number of farms today in the following states. If you take the state of North Dakota and add it to South Dakota, and the farmers in Minnesota and add them to the farmers in Wisconsin, and add the farmers in Illinois to the Iowa farmers, and the farmers in Nebraska and in Colorado, and the farmers in Oklahoma and Missouri, you'd have 544,000, roughly 544,000 farms. 10 states, entire farm population. It's a large number. In addition to losing those farms, we've also lost farm land. And this is equally concerning. 151 million acres of land that was in farming in 1981 that's not being farmed today. It's not like it went to a larger farming operation, it went out of farming. That is the equivalent of the land mass of Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Maryland, and 60% of Virginia in 40 years. So one of the reasons we deal with high land prices is that there's 151 million fewer acres of it. And if that trend continues, it will continue to put more and more pressure on farm families and on the ag industry and on USDA to figure out strategies of how you continue to produce more with less land. And that creates a greater impetus for larger and larger farming operations. So I share this with you because I think it's important to understand that there's a different model, there's a different opportunity, there's, I think, an opportunity here for us to do what needs to be done, which is to continue to have commercial-sized operations, but to complement them with small and mid-sized operations so that there's diversity and choice for farm families, and that we continue to repopulate, if you will, rural America. I think it's important to note that last year was the first year in over 10 years that we actually saw an increase in rural population. So I think we're headed in the right direction. I think we've got a strategy. And now the question is whether we're going to continue to support it and continue to have policies that will be supportive of it. I'm going to finish with just a brief discussion of the Farm Bill, such as it is. It's pretty simple, really. There's a focus and a desire on the part of some in Congress to increase reference prices for producers. Now, reference prices impact and affect about 22 major commodities out of over 100 that are grown and raised in the United States. And within those commodities, there's really about a half a dozen that actually would benefit from what has been proposed by the House Ag Committee that got through their committee, but has not yet been put up for a vote. There's a reason it wasn't put up for a vote. It's because if it was, it probably would fail. Now, why would it fail? Well, there are two reasons for that. One is it crossed a line when it essentially, to pay for some of the increases in programs, including reference prices, the decision was made to take, to essentially reduce SNAP benefits over a 10-year period. And that was a bright line, a red line, if you will, for a number of people in Congress. And the reason it was, in part, is because a deal was made when the debt ceiling was increased that altered SNAP, that made it more difficult for some older SNAP recipients to continue to receive benefits. And the deal was that that would be the only adjustment that would be made in this Congress to the SNAP program. So you lose votes there. And on the other hand, when you look at the Farm Bill, there isn't enough money in the way in which the bill is crafted to essentially pay for all of the increases. Now, it's not me saying this, it's the Congressional Budget Office saying it. They're the individual arbitrator of the value of certain policy decisions and how much money is saved and how much money is spent. When they calculated the reference price increase, they asked, how are you paying for it? And the answer was, we're paying for it by restricting the ability of the Department of Agriculture and its secretary to use a portion of the Commodity Credit Corporation. Now, this is a fund that is replenished every year. It's a fund that provides the resources for CRP, for ARC, PLC, for a variety of the emergency assistance that we provide when we're faced with things like hurricanes and things of that nature. It's also the resource that we're utilizing in part to support the Climate Smart Agriculture Initiative. It's also the resource that we're using to encourage more local and regional food purchasing from small and mid-sized producers. They want to restrict that, which they have the right to do. The problem is they basically are saying that that restriction will save somewhere between $30 and $40 billion over 10 years. The problem with that calculation is that the CBO doesn't agree. The CBO basically says the calculation is more like $10 billion. So there's a deficit within the Farm Bill that was passed through committee. And when you have a deficit, you lose votes because there are some who don't believe there should be a deficit. So we're faced with a dilemma of whether or not we're going to reduce our expectations in terms of reference prices and increases, or we're going to find additional resources to be able to pay and cover the deficit so that you can put together the votes sufficient to pass the bill. And right now, expectations have not been lowered and new money has not been identified. I believe that there is a growing consensus from agriculture, from the industry, from commodity groups, essentially asking Congress to get this done, that the uncertainty for the last year plus is making it more and more difficult for farmers to feel comfortable about the situation. And they have expressed in no uncertain terms the hope and belief that this needs to get done, and needs to get done now. Because if it doesn't get done now, and you roll it over past January 1st, you've got some major challenges because you have to start all over again. You would have a new administration, and you would have a new Congress, and you would have to start the whole process over again. So you would be looking at an additional extension for a period of time. So the goal here, I think, is to try to get this thing done. But to get it done, people either have to become practical in terms of the reference prices, or they have to be real about the cost of it and be able to identify the resources necessary to cover the cost. So, a lot of good news, a lot of challenges, a way forward that I think provides an opportunity for small and mid-sized producers, which is important. It's these are family farming operations, and they're really critically important to rural America. And that's why we've been fighting so hard to educate folks about this, so that we don't have to necessarily accept one fate. I believe strongly in this effort, and we're beginning to hear stories of people who are appreciative of it and who believe that it is actually something that could potentially save their operation. I know two things about dairy farmers and about farmers generally. One is that you love to do what you're doing, and you want to continue to do it. And two, it is your genuine hope and desire to make sure that the next generation of your family has that same opportunity. And we're committed to doing everything we can at USDA to try to make that happen. So again, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I would say I look forward to questions, but of course it depends on the difficulty of the question. But it's great to be back at the World Dairy Expo, and happy to try to respond to as many questions as time permits. And appreciate everything that dairy farmers do for the country, the nutrition they provide, the challenges that they've overcome, their willingness to try something different and to really propose and suggest this notion of climate-smart agriculture. It all started with the dairy industry, and a belief on that part of the leadership of that industry that there needed to be a better way for farm families to have a shot. So. I listened, I learned from all of you, and we're putting it into action at USDA. So with that, I will stop and sit over here and take questions.
We could take the middle too. Middle, the center stage. Mr. Secretary, we have a number of delegations here from around the world, and in particular, there's a big group from Indonesia and Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan, and some partnerships with Wisconsin Department of Agriculture, with NASDA, the National Association of State Departments, and of course, a group that does a lot of work and are some of our best people in USDA, the Foreign Agricultural Service. Perhaps you could speak to some of our international guests at World Dairy Expo about opportunities to work together with American agriculture, USDA, if you will, please.
Well, it is great to know the countries that you name, because these are countries that we are anxious to do business with. I think for trade to work, individual countries need to understand that it doesn't necessarily mean a net loss, if you will, for producers in that country. There's a tendency, I think, on the part of some folks to feel that if you're trading, if you're buying product from some other country, that somehow, some way, you're disadvantaging your producers. My response to that is as follows. One, your consumers benefit. Your consumers benefit because the more choice they have, the more opportunities there are, potentially the lower the cost might be for consumers. So consumers benefit from trade. Secondly, it spurs innovation. It spurs new product thinking in both countries. As they get exposed to whatever we're producing here in a value-added proposition, it encourages, well, how could we do this? Or how could we do something akin to this. So it can help the industry in that country continue to expand. To do this requires people. You need to have representatives of the dairy industry, both from government and from the industry, present in the country, developing relationships and understanding where the opportunities are. You need to have an understanding of the market. Not every market is the same globally. There are requirements, cultural requirements that need to be taken into consideration. And frankly, when you do business, our industry, when it does business with a place like Indonesia, it begins to understand perhaps more about halal and things of that nature. And that can also expand opportunities even in the United States. So more presence, more people, more promotions, an opportunity to introduce products that we have to the world. And all of that requires resources, which is why it was important for us to utilize resources from the Commodity Credit Corporation, the CCC, to create the RAP program, the Regional Agricultural Promotion that I mentioned briefly. That program basically is providing resources to cooperators across the commodity groups, including dairy, to be able to then have more people, have more presence, have more promotions, participate in trade shows, maybe even bring people from other countries to the United States to see our operation, to get a better understanding of how and what we do here. All of that is important, not just for the opportunity that agriculture creates, but it's also important because of the relationship it builds between the two countries. Indonesia, for example, is an extraordinarily important country in Southeast Asia from a strategic standpoint and from a population standpoint. It's important for the U.S. to have relationships and connections to that country and to other countries. And so it's important for us at the Foreign Ag Service to figure out ways in which we can facilitate those partnerships and those relationships. The last thing I would say is this underscores the fact that it isn't just always about trade agreements. There's a tendency on the part of agriculture, in my view, to be focused on trade agreements and not understand that there are other ways to open up markets by reducing tariffs, by negotiations, by, like I say, since the baseball playoffs are started here, unfortunately, Milwaukee didn't make it last night.
That didn't end too well.
No, it didn't end too well. But singles and doubles can result in runs. And in fact, we've had quite a few singles and doubles in the last several years that have opened up markets or preserved markets to the tune of about $23 billion of additional trade, which is why our trade numbers are at or near record levels. So important to have these countries here, important to build the relationships, but it does require investment, and at USDA we're making that investment.
You brought up trade agreements. Before I came to the stage, we're using Slido to gather questions, and a number of them came in with different derivatives, and this is the question I kind of put together from the audience. Growth in U.S. agriculture depends on not only domestic consumers, but growing exports for many of our foods. How do you envision that we continue to grow without some new trade agreements, or more importantly, how do we leverage existing trade agreements and do better with them?
Well, I think Canada represents an example of an existing trade agreement where we believed that the Canadians were not living up to the responsibilities under the trade agreement, under the USMCA. Several actions were brought within that agreement to try to hold Canada to a different standard. We had some success initially, and we're not necessarily pleased with the last decision. But here's what I think is important for this audience to know, that as a result of the decisions that were made, last year was a record year for Canadian exports of dairy products. So we did see an increase. And so enforcing existing agreements and making sure that people live up to the responsibilities that they've agreed to is important. Utilizing the resources of the Foreign Ag Service, the U.S. Trade Representative's Office, identifying places and opportunities where tariffs may be high, where there may be things within that market that create barriers to additional and increased trade, and negotiating them away, also really important. So you have seen in the last several years tariffs come down in a number of countries, barriers reduced, requirements eased, flexibilities created, which has resulted in preserving or expanding trade opportunities. So it's important to continue to focus on those singles and doubles. Here's the challenge with trade agreements. First of all, you have to ask yourself, well, if you had a trade agreement today, you negotiated one with, pick a country, could you get it through Congress? Well, today there is no fast track authority in place. Now, fast track authority is that power for a trade agreement that's being proposed for Congress to vote either yes or no without amending the trade agreement. So when you have fast track authority, you have an up or down vote, yes or no, are you in favor or not? Without fast track authority, you now have 535 opportunities, represented 435 members of the House, 100 members of the Senate. Every single one of them can propose an amendment to the trade agreement. So if you're negotiating with the United States, and you know that after you shake your hand and you say, we've got a deal here, if we can get it through Congress, and you know as a negotiator that there are 535 folks who will take a shot at this and amend it, how confident are you in that final deal? The reality is you're not. So first and foremost, that's an issue. Secondly, it's not easy to get trade agreements through, and in part because we've created this sense in the country that trade isn't necessarily a good thing. Some of us believe that trade has always worked at a disadvantage to the United States. Now, the folks in agriculture understand that's not necessarily the case because historically we've had trade surpluses. Now, we've got a trade deficit now, and there's a reason for that. Part of it is the strength of the U.S. economy and the strength of the U.S. dollar. Part of it is the weakness of the of the global economy. Part of it is a result of some of our trading partners not purchasing as much as they used to. An example of that would be China. China was, and for many years, our #1 customer. Today, I believe they're number 2 or number 3 because they've seen a market decline in purchasing. And we can get into the reasons behind that, but the reality is that has forced us to expand beyond the usual suspects, which is one of the reasons why we're seeing tariffs come down, barriers being reduced, and numbers being improved. So until we have a better attitude in this country about trade and politicians are more willing to embrace the notion of fast track authority and be willing to vote for trade agreements, notwithstanding the belief that somehow it hurts our economy, we have to continue to focus on the things that we can and we do have power over, and that's what we've been doing.
Mr. Secretary, I know you talked a lot about climate smart agriculture. A number of audience questions is maybe you could repeat a couple of those points, but when it comes to on-farm sustainability and innovations on dairy farms, how are there some opportunities for small to mid-sized dairy farms to receive support in this category?
Absolutely. The whole notion of these projects is to provide significant resources for a 3 to 5 year period. So there's longevity and significant resources. We have partners. It's not, USDA is not basically dictating what farmers and producers have to do. It's the lead partner and the partnerships that involve major food companies, major environmental groups, major commodity groups, major universities, historic black colleges, minority serving institutions, a wide variety of partners working collaboratively together to identify a suite of practices and to say to farmers, if you embrace these practices, you will be paid X. It may be on a per head basis, it may be on a per acre basis. We'll continue to pay you for that 3 to 5 year period. All you have to do is work with us to provide us basic information about the benefits or the results, if you will, of those practices so that we can aggregate all that information and that will tell us what in fact works and doesn't work, which then translates into us being able to establish the ecosystem service market system and opportunity for producers. That in turn creates that additional revenue source. So not only do you get a better price for whatever it is you're purchasing, if you think about it, it's a third category. You've got organic, you've got everything else. We're now creating something in the middle. So value-added opportunity and a new market, a new income stream through being able to sell not just the product, but how you produce the product. There is no situation where we basically say you have to have so many dairy cows in your operation to participate. What we're saying is, if you are a dairy operator, you have a chance to participate. You can go online at USDA.gov, type in Climate Smart Agriculture. That'll take you to a map. Click on your state. That state will identify all of the projects, all the commodities, all the programs and projects that are operating in your state. You click on one of those projects, you'll find the lead partner. You call the lead partner up and say, hey, I want to participate. They sign you up, and you start to be part of the solution. And it embraces not just climate smart, but it also embraces renewable energy opportunities. So dairy producers in particular, because of what they can do to produce energy on the farm in a variety of sources, a variety of ways, they have an opportunity to have sort of a double shot by getting the climate smart payment, qualifying for an ecosystem service market, and maybe embracing renewable energy on the farm to lower their costs, and maybe even produce excess energy that they in turn can sell. So now there's 4 benefits accruing to the farm family from that.
Thank you, Secretary Vilsack. At this point, I would like to invite Wisconsin State Secretary Randy Romanski back to the stage to wrap up our Global Dairy Forum. Let's give Secretary Vilsack a round of applause.
Okay. Thank you once again, Secretary Vilsack, for joining us in Wisconsin at the World Dairy Expo and the Global Dairy Summit. Thank you to Corey for being our moderator today and navigating through the questions. Thanks to our esteemed presenters for sharing your views today. We're grateful for the time that you spent here with us, but also preparing for the presentation and the remarks. My team doesn't know that I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do it here right now. I really wanted to say thank you to the people that kind of helped put this together. It starts with the partners here at World Dairy Expo. They've been great in working with us to make this happen. And then I'm going to specifically name some of our team members because they deserve it. It takes a lot to put these things on and make it all work as smoothly as it did. I want to thank Krista Knigge, Mark Rodahesh, Jennifer Liu, Shirley Acedo, Jacob Loom, Amy Kennedy, Sam Go, and one of the people who is really helping to coordinate all this and making it seamless and deserves an extra level of thanks is Ashley Andry from our team at DATCAP. So thank you to all of them. Members of the media, you're going to be welcome to interview today's presenters. So if you could, please give us a couple minutes, but join us to the side of the stage and walk outside the tan bark for interviews. Thanks for spreading the word about the importance of dairy here in the United States and around the world. And then finally, whether you are from Wisconsin, from another state, or from another country, thanks for attending the Global Dairy Summit and the World Dairy Expo. Please stay at the tan bark for networking time afterwards. Continue to engage with presenters and ask questions as you're able to. I hope you enjoy the remainder of the World Dairy Expo, attending the impressive dairy cattle show, visiting the trade center, and participating in some educational programming. We're glad to have you in Madison. Enjoy your time with us, safe travels, and come back again. And before I close, there's 2 things I want to mention. Remember, it's Wisconsin, and there's milk in the back, and there's grilled cheese out this door. So take some time to enjoy those things as well. Thanks a lot, everybody.